What happens when the demon fox's host loses every chakra pathway and gains the power to never stop moving? This monster of a man walks through fire, blades, genjutsu, and gods, turning armies and Madara into paste. One punch, open sky, entire wars end. Naruto doesn't negotiate, he bulldozes, because he's the fucking Juggernaut.
Let me tell you about the night. Konoha stopped being the strongest thing in Konoha. Most people who tell this story started at the graduation exam. They started with a kid in an orange jumpsuit and a paper hat, hustling a chunin out of a headband. Cute story. Wrong story. The story you're about to hear starts 5 years earlier in an alley behind a butcher shop with a 7-year-old boy running for his life and 4 grown men laughing behind him, because that's the part everyone forgets. Before he was the thing that made Kage sweat through their robes, Naruto Uzumaki was small. He was small and he was alone and he ran. He ran a lot. It was October 10th. Of course it was. In Konoha, the 10th of October came with lanterns and rice wine and a whole village pretending to celebrate a victory while getting drunk enough to admit what they actually wanted to do about it. The 4th Hokage's death anniversary. The Nine Tails Festival. Every year the same thing. The streets filled up, the sake flowed, and somewhere around midnight a certain kind of man remembered that the demon lived in an apartment on the east side and had a bedtime. 4 chunin. Field grade. 2 of them had been at the Kyuubi attack as teenagers. 1 had lost a brother. That's the part they tell themselves later, in the version of the night where they were the heroes. They cornered him outside a shuttered noodle stall. Naruto was 7, 42 pounds soaking wet, wearing a shirt 3 sizes too big, because that's what the orphanage stipend covered. He had a cut over his eyebrow already from a thrown bottle. He'd been awake for 19 hours because he'd learned that sleeping on October 10th was how you woke up with a broken arm. Hey demon, that's how it started. 2 words. One of them had a kunai out and wasn't hiding it. Naruto ran. He was good at it. Kid could move through the back streets of Konoha like water through a drain, and he knew every fence gap, every loose board, every dog that would bark, and every dog that wouldn't. He hit the north path, cut through the training grounds, and started climbing the slope under the Hokage monument because the brush was thick up there. And adults were bad at brush. He got maybe 200 meters up the hill before the ground opened. He didn't fall. He dropped sheer vertical, straight down through rotted timber and packed clay into black air, tumbling through a shaft that had been sealed so long the seals themselves had crumbled into powder. He hit stone. Hard. 20 feet, maybe 30. His wrists snapped, his hands tore open on gravel, and he lay there in absolute blackness with his heart going like a rabbit's, tasting blood, listening to the men above him shouting his name in that friendly voice adults use right before they hurt you. And then he heard the hum. Now here's something the history books skip. Under the Hokage monument, beneath the 2nd Hokage's earliest foundation work, there is a cavern. It's on no map. It's in no archive. The 2nd Hokage sealed it personally, ordered every worker who dug it reassigned to the far border, and when the council asked him what was down there, he said one sentence and never spoke of it again. Some doors stay shut. Then he died, and he took the reason with him, death, and for 80 years the door stayed shut, and that was fine and it worked, right up until a 7-year-old boy running from 4 drunks fell straight through the roof of it. The hum came from the middle of the room. Naruto got up. Broken wrist, blood in his eyes, and he got up and he walked toward the sound, because when you're 7 and the whole world has already told you what you are, curiosity is the only thing you own. The light started as a pinprick, then a glow. Then the whole cavern lit up crimson. It sat half buried in cracked stone and dead white roots, a jagged red meteorite the size of a man's chest, edges like broken glass, and it was pulsing, slow, steady, like a heartbeat that had been keeping time there since before the shinobi world had a name for itself. The hum wasn't sound. It was in his teeth, in his ribs, in the marrow of him, saying something in a language older than language. Move. Naruto reached out with a bleeding hand and touched the crimson gem of Cyttorak. I want you to understand something. The stories say Cyttorak was a god. That's underselling it. Cyttorak was the idea that came before gods, the raw principle of forward motion, of war, of the thing that starts and does not end. Somewhere in a place that has no direction, that thing had crystallized a fragment of its own heart and thrown it into the dirt of 100 worlds, waiting for someone desperate enough to grab it. It didn't give Naruto a helmet. It didn't give him armor. It went into him. The gem came apart in his fist like a coal swallowed whole, and every drop of it went into his blood, and then the burning started. His chakra network, that fragile little tree of pathways every shinobi spends their life cultivating, lit up once and burned out completely, root to branch, gone forever in about a second and a half. Naruto screamed. He screamed until his voice broke, and then he kept screaming without sound. His bones came apart and rebuilt themselves denser than steel, denser than anything the elemental nations had ever mined out of the earth. His muscle tore itself off the bone and re-knit in a pattern no living thing had ever grown. Coiled, layered, stacked like something designed by an engineer with a grudge. His heart stopped, restarted, and started pushing something that was Chakra's older, meaner cousin. The cut over his eyebrow closed. The broken wrist popped straight and knit in 3 seconds. Every old scar on his body, and there were a lot of them, smoothed out like they'd never happened, and the aura came. Crimson, crawling over his skin like living lightning, like a fire that had learned to walk, coming off his shoulders in slow rolling waves that made the stone under his feet crack in rings. There was one law in it, one rule. Naruto felt it settle in him the way you feel a name. Keep moving. Once you move, nothing stops you. Nothing. The Chunin found the hole. They dropped in one at a time, kunai first, calling out to each other in the black. Then one of them found a lantern seal and lit it, and all 4 of them stared. There was a boy standing in the rubble. Red energy crawled across him in slow arcs, throwing his shadow onto the walls in 4 directions at once. He was still wearing the shirt 3 sizes too big. He was still 7 years old. He wasn't running. The one who lost a brother came in fast. Textbook thrust, straight to the heart. A killing strike he drilled 10,000 times. The kunai hit Naruto's chest and burst into 11 pieces of scrap iron. Nobody moved. In the whole cavern, for about 1 full second, nobody moved. And that second is the exact hinge on which this entire story turns. Because on one side of it, there was a village with a demon problem it thought it could beat up. And on the other side, there was this. Naruto reached up and took the man by the jaw. He didn't know how strong he was yet. That's the thing people miss when they tell it like he was a monster from the jump. He was 7. He squeezed the way a scared kid squeezes. The man's jaw came apart in his hand. The other 3 broke. All at once. All 3 of them, running for the shaft, screaming things at each other that stopped being words halfway out of their mouths. And that's when the second half of the gift woke up. Because Naruto Uzumaki took 1 step after them, and the crimson roared, and the step covered 15 feet, and the cavern floor cratered where his boot left it. They never made the wall. I'm not going to walk you through all of it. You don't need it. What you need is the picture at the end. A cavern with a busted roof, a lantern seal guttering out on the floor, 4 sets of Konoha issue flak jackets, and a boy standing in the middle of it with red light dripping off his fists, breathing hard, staring at his own hands like they belonged to someone else. He climbed out. 25 feet of vertical shaft. He went up it in 3 jumps. Then he walked back down the hill and into the festival. Picture that, honestly. Picture the lanterns and the stalls and the music, and a woman selling grilled squid, and a 7-year-old walking up the middle of the street covered head to toe in blood that isn't his. People got out of the way. They didn't know why. Something about the way he was walking. Something about the fact that the air around him rippled like heat off a road. He stopped at a stall where a man had abandoned a half-finished pack of cigarettes on the counter and run for it. Naruto looked at the pack for a second. He took one, lit it off a fallen lantern's flame. He'd hate the taste for about a week. Then he'd stop noticing. Then he went home. The next morning, the Anbu found the cavern. The 3rd Hokage went down himself, and Hiruzen Sarutobi stood in that hole for 20 minutes without saying a word, and when he came up, he had gone the color of old paper. He ordered the shaft filled with concrete. He classified the whole thing at a level so high, there are only 2 living people who can read the file. He put a watch on Naruto Uzumaki, and he sat in his office that night with his pipe unlit and thought, over and over, what did we do? Because he knew. Right then, on day 1, the old man understood something the rest of the village would take 5 years to catch up on. They didn't have a Jinchuriki problem anymore. They had a Naruto problem. 5 years is a long time in a village that size. Long enough for a story to change shape. Here's how Konoha changed. Year 1, they still tried. A shopkeeper shorted him on change and got his display case turned into gravel. A pair of academy bullies decided the new quiet Naruto looked easier than the old loud one and spent 6 weeks in the hospital learning otherwise. Someone put a brick through his window and Naruto came out the front door in his shorts, walked to the man's house, and put the brick back through his window from the street. 40 meters, through the wall, and out the other side. Year 2, the whisper started going the other direction. Don't touch the Uzumaki kid. Not because of the fox, because of what happened to Jinma's cousin, because of the thing with the Inuzuka's fence. Because when Naruto Uzumaki walked past the Yamanaka flower shop, the wind chimes swung inward. Year 3 was the sake bottle. A jonin, real jonin, tokubetsu grade, names in a report nobody's allowed to quote, got loud outside Ichiraku on a Friday night and threw a bottle at Naruto's back while the kid was eating. Everyone at the stand heard it break. Everyone at the stand watched Naruto put down his chopsticks, get off the stool, cross the street, and take the man apart with 2 moves. 1 hand to the ribs, 1 hand closing on a wrist. 3 broken ribs, a hand that would never hold a kunai again. Naruto walked back, sat down, and asked Tochi for extra cha. She gave him extra chashu. And here's the part I love, honestly. Tochi never once looked at him different. Old man just kept ladling broth. Ayame kept saying good evening. That ramen stand was the one place in that village where nobody flinched. And if you want to know why Naruto Uzumaki still had a single human thread left in him at 12 years old, part of the answer is a noodle stand with a cloth flap and 2 people who refuse to be scared. The rest of the answer is a chunin with a scar across his nose. By year 5, 3 separate jonin had changed their route home to avoid the east side. There was an unwritten rule at the mission desk that nobody assigned the Uzumaki surveillance shift twice in a row, because the observers came back with headaches and a vague sense of having been noticed. Civilians crossed the street, not out of hate. That was the wild part. The hate had curdled into something else entirely, and the new thing was worse, because you can argue with hate. You can't argue with fear. And at 12, Naruto Uzumaki was 6 feet even and built like a demolition job. Not lean, not the wiry whipcord thing Genin were supposed to be. He was thick through the shoulders and the neck and the forearms, and he moved with all of it. And every step he took put a little more weight into the ground than physics said it should. Deep crimson jacket, collar up, combat boots, black pants with a dozen pockets he never used, a scowl that had settled in around age 9 and never left, and the cigarette, always the cigarette. Did it do anything to him? Course not. His body burned it off before it hit his lungs. He kept smoking anyway, and I'll tell you exactly why. Because the first one he ever had, he lit off a lantern while covered in the blood of 4 men who tried to kill him, and every single one since has been a reminder to himself and to everyone watching. I'm not running anymore. Now, Iruka Umino, I need you to appreciate Iruka Umino, because the man had no reason on earth to do what he did. His parents died in the Nine-Tails attack. He had every excuse the village handed out for free. And when a 6-foot 12-year-old who had personally hospitalized members of the Konoha military police walked into his classroom, Iruka Umino looked at him and thought, that's my student. So he tried. He gave Naruto detention. Naruto came to detention, sat in the back row, boots on the desk, and read. He was always reading the same thing. A bingo book. Not the Academy issue one either. A black market Iwa edition, current, with the SS ranks in the back and the bounty figures unredacted. Naruto had that thing memorized cover to cover by the 2nd month. Every face, every technique, every kill count. Iruka asked him about it once. Only time Naruto ever answered a question in that room without being asked twice. Why the bingo book, Naruto? You planning on hunting Nuke 9? Naruto turned a page. I'm figuring out what strong looks like. And? Still looking. Iruka gave him extra homework. Naruto did it. That's the thing nobody believes. He actually did it. All of it. In handwriting like a bricklayer's. And he got most of it right, because the kid was not stupid. He was never stupid. He read history like a man reading a scouting report. He knew the treaty lines. He knew which clan owed which clan money. He knew that the Uchiha district had been empty for 6 years, and he knew the official story, and he knew what the official story smelled like. What he could not do, what he would never do again, was mold chakra, because he didn't have any. Not one drop, not one pathway. The Cyttorak fire had burned that network out of him at 7 and paved over it with something else. And every attempt to teach Naruto Uzumaki the Academy 3 ended the same way. A boy standing there with his hands in the ram seal, feeling absolutely nothing, while a red shimmer crawled off his knuckles and the wooden floor under him creaked. He couldn't make a clone. He couldn't do a transformation. He couldn't even manage the substitution, which is why he failed the graduation exam 3 years running, and why the third time, when Iruka called his name, Naruto didn't even get out of his chair. Naruto, the clone technique, please. Naruto looked at him, lit a cigarette in a government building in front of 2 proctors at the graduation exam. Fail me. Naruto, fail me, Iruka-sensei. He said the honorific. That's the tell. He never dropped it, Lee, not once, in 3 years. I don't do party tricks. And he walked out. They had a meeting about it that night. Full instructor board, Mizuki taking notes, the third Hokage sitting in. Somebody suggested holding him back a 4th year. Somebody else suggested the alternative track, the one for kids with bloodline complications. And then a Chunin at the end of the table cleared his throat and said what everybody was thinking. Are we going to be the ones who tell him? Long pause. He's already 6 feet tall, the man added. He put Tokubetsu Jonin Hazashi in traction for a bottle. I'd like to see my daughter grow up. They passed him, wrote unconventional taijutsu specialization on the form, filed it, and went home. That's the shinobi world for you. Whole village built on strength, and the second real strength walks in the door with a scowl on. Everybody suddenly discovers paperwork. Iruka argued against passing him, by the way. And that matters. Iruka Umino stood up in that meeting and said, if we hand him a headband he hasn't earned, we're telling him the same thing everyone else in this village tells him, that he's a problem to be managed, not a person to be taught. Fail him or teach him. Pick one. They didn't pick. They passed him anyway. And Mizuki, sitting at the end of the table with his pen moving, thought about the forbidden scroll of sealing and about a big stupid violent boy with no chakra and no friends, and he smiled to himself because he just found his hands. Here's the thing about Mizuki. He wasn't dumb either. His plan was actually decent. Find the outcast. Feed him a lie about a secret makeup exam. Let him steal the scroll from the Hokage residence, take it off his corpse in the woods, run for Orochimaru, and let the village hang a dead 12-year-old with the words demon thief over his body. Clean. Nobody investigates too hard when the culprit's already in the ground and everybody already hated him. The flaw in the plan was one detail Mizuki had in his notes and never once thought about properly. No chakra, physical anomaly, multiple assault incidents. He'd written it himself. He just didn't read it. Mizuki found Naruto sitting on the roof of the academy at dusk, feet over the edge, headband in his hand, turning it over. Naruto, hey, listen, there's another way to pass. A makeup test, secret one. Even Iruka doesn't know. Naruto didn't look at him. You have to steal a scroll from the Hokage's library and learn a technique from it. Bring it to me in the South Woods and I'll sign off. That's it. You'd graduate for real. Long drag. Long exhale. Naruto flicked ash off the roof edge and watched it fall. Now, and this is the part that kills me, Naruto knew. He knew. He'd read a bingo book 600 times. He could smell a setup through a wall. He knew Mizuki was lying the second the man said, even Iruka doesn't know, because Iruka was the only person in that building who actually paid attention to him. He went anyway. You want to know why? Because it was a Friday night, and he had nothing to do, and it sounded like entertainment. That's it. That's the whole reason. Naruto Uzumaki walked into an assassination attempt the way a bored man walks into a bar. "Southwoods," he said. "Sure." Getting the scroll took him 9 minutes. He walked into the Hokage residence through a second-floor window, ripped a barrier seal off the archive door with his bare hand, a seal keyed to chakra signatures, which does absolutely nothing to a body that has none, which is a security flaw the village would spend the next month having a nervous breakdown about, and walked out with a scroll the length of his arm across his shoulders. 2 ambush sensors on duty registered nothing at all. There was nothing to register. He sat down in a clearing in the South Woods, unrolled it, and read. 30 seconds. That's how long the Forbidden Scroll of Sealing held the attention of Naruto Uzumaki. Multiple shadow clone technique. Chakra-based, useless to him, Reaper Death Seal. Chakra-based, and also required the summoning of a death god, which he read twice, and then decided the author of this scroll had some issues. Earth Release, Underworld Turnaround. Chakra-based, and honestly kind of a letdown for something written in a forbidden scroll in red ink. He snorted. Actually snorted out loud, alone in a forest, at a document 3 Hokage had bled to protect. "All of it needs coils," he muttered, and rolled it back up and lay down on it like a pillow with his hands behind his head. Waste of a walk. That's when Iruka came through the trees. Bleeding from the shoulder, breathing wrong, having sprinted 4 miles across the village after finding Naruto's apartment empty and putting it together faster than the entire Anbu sensor division. "Naruto, what are you doing?" Naruto opened one eye. "Sleeping. Try it sometime." "Do you have any idea what that scroll is?" "Boring. That's what it is." Naruto sat up and jerked his chin at the man's shoulder. "You're leaking." Iruka looked down at his own arm and seemed genuinely surprised to find a wound there. And that's when Mizuki dropped out of the canopy with 2 giant Fuma shurikens strapped to his back and his headband already off. And the whole thing went sideways in the exact way Mizuki had planned and the exact opposite way it would actually go. "Nice work, Naruto," Mizuki smiled. That teacher's smile. "Hand me the scroll and this all ends nicely." Don't listen to him. Iruka got between them, staggered, and stayed there. He put his arms out. This Chunin with a hole in his shoulder, physically shielding a boy who was 8 inches taller than him and could have walked through a wall of the academy without slowing down. "He used you, Naruto. He's going to kill you and take it." "Yeah." Naruto stood up and stretched his back. "I know." Iruka's head whipped around. You know? Since the roof." Naruto pulled the pack out of his jacket. "Said you didn't know about the makeup test. You know everything about me. You're the only one who bothers." He put a cigarette between his lips. "So either he's lying or you stopped caring, and I already checked and you're too annoying to stop caring." I don't think Iruka Umino ever got a better compliment in his whole life. And I don't think he had any idea what to do with it either, because he just stood there in the middle of a forest with his mouth open while Mizuki's face slowly came apart. "Fine." Mizuki's. "Then let's do this the fun way. Naruto, do you want to know why the village hates you? Do you want to know the real reason?" Iruka knows. Everyone your age's parents know. There's a law about it. Mizuki, don't. 12 years ago, the 9-tailed fox attacked this village. It wasn't killed. It was sealed into a newborn baby. Mizuki's voice went up into that shrill place where a man mistakes volume for power. "You're the fox, Naruto. You're the thing that murdered Iruka's parents. You're the monster in a kid's skin, and every single person who ever looked at you knew it. You're a demon, Naruto." Beautiful speech. He'd clearly practiced it. And here's what he was expecting. He was expecting the freeze, the wobble, the tears. He'd seen it in his head 100 times, the boy's face crumpling, the scroll dropping out of nerveless fingers, the whole personality caving in like wet paper. What he got was a 12-year-old lighting a fresh cigarette off the ember of the old one, holding them together for a second so the flame caught, and then flicking the dead one into the grass. Naruto exhaled, looked at him, and the look on his face was the flattest thing you've ever seen. Absolutely level. The face of somebody who has heard worse from people who are now under the ground. "That it?" Mizuki blinked. "What? Is that it?" "The big secret." Naruto rolled his neck. It cracked twice. "Guy who lost a brother told me I was a demon while he was stabbing me. I was 7. Yours is worse, 'cause you're louder. Iruka made a sound. I don't have a word for it. Half a laugh. Half something breaking. Mizuki's hand went for the strap on his back. You arrogant little... You talk too much, Naruto growled. And that voice, I have to describe that voice, because everybody who ever heard it says the same thing. When Naruto Uzumaki dropped his voice down into the low register, it didn't sound like a kid. It didn't even sound like a man. It sounded like gravel dragged across iron, like something big shifting in its sleep. And it came out of a 12-year-old chest and hit the back of your spine. Mizuki threw. The Fuma shuriken came off his hand at full rotation, 4 blades screaming, and it was a good throw, a killing throw, aimed dead at the throat, the one part of the human body that ends arguments. It hit Naruto's neck, and the giant shuriken, a folding steel weapon the size of a wagon wheel, folded the wrong way. All 4 blades snapped at the root. The whole thing came apart into iron shards that fell around Naruto's boots like a wind chime hitting a floor, and one of the pieces skipped off Iruka's leg, and Iruka didn't even notice. Naruto tapped his own neck with 2 fingers. Checked them. Nothing. Now watch Mizuki's face. I want you to really watch it, because this is the moment. First, there's nothing. Total blankness, the brain refusing delivery on the message. Then the eyes go to the shards on the ground and come back up. Then the mouth opens a little, and then it arrives all at once, the whole freight of it, and Mizuki Tuji's face turns into the face of an animal in a snare. He'd spent an hour that morning planning how to explain the body. That's a mist-forged blade, he said. Just said it. To nobody. That shouldn't. Naruto lowered his shoulder. Let me tell you what that means when he does that. Because everything else about the man was noise. The smoking, the scowl, the mouth. When Naruto Uzumaki dropped his shoulder, the argument was already over. It was the sound of a starter's pistol in a race nobody else was entered in. The crimson went up around him like a wildfire that had been handed a direction. The grass in a 10-foot circle flattened outward. The air pressure in that clearing changed enough that Iruka's ears popped. And Naruto moved. 60 feet in a blink. The ground he pushed off didn't hold. It blew out behind him in a shower of dirt and root, a trench opening in his wake, and he crossed that clearing so fast that Mizuki's body was still in the follow-through of his own throw. He hit Mizuki the way a freight train hits a car somebody left on the tracks. I want to be clear about what that sounds like, because everyone always describes the visual and misses the audio. It was one sound, not a crunch, not a thud. One enormous flat wham that flushed birds out of trees a quarter-mile away and left a ringing in Iruka's head that lasted 3 days. Mizuki did not fly backward. That's the thing. That's the horror of it. He didn't get knocked away because Naruto didn't stop. Naruto's right hand came up and closed over Mizuki's entire face, palm across the nose, fingers wrapped around the skull. And then Naruto Uzumaki kept running. First tree. 100-year-old oak 4 feet through the trunk. It didn't slow him down. It exploded. Splinters the size of kunai fanned out through the clearing, and Mizuki's spine took the load and his scream cut out for a second, because you cannot scream and be compressed at the same time. Second tree. Cedar. Went through it at an angle and took the top 40 feet of it with him. The whole crown coming down behind them in a rolling crash. Mizuki got his voice back for exactly half a syllable. Third tree. This one was a big one. Ancient thing, wider than a door, the kind of trunk you'd build a house out of. Naruto put Mizuki's back into it at a speed that had no business existing under the atmosphere. That tree came out of the ground, roots and all. 20 tons of old wood tore up out of the soil, tipped, and came down flat across the forest floor with a boom you could hear at the village gate. Naruto stopped, stood up, rolled his shoulder once, like a man who'd carried something heavy up some stairs. He looked down at what was in his hand and then let go, and it dropped, and he wiped his palm on the leg of his pants. Mizuki was alive. That's the part that always gets me. He was alive, because Naruto had held the head, and the head was the one part that hadn't taken direct load, and so Mizuki Tuji lay in a trench of his own making, with a body that would never again do a single thing he asked of it. And he was conscious. And he was looking up through the broken canopy at a boy putting a cigarette back between his lips. 90 seconds earlier, this man had been the predator in this story. Naruto scraped the bottom of one boot on a patch of grass, then the other. Then he looked over at Iruka. Iruka Umino was on his knees. He hadn't decided to be. His legs had just gone, somewhere around the second tree, and he was kneeling in the dirt with the forbidden scroll of sealing lying forgotten 2 feet away and his face the color of rice paper. "Clean up this mess," Naruto said. "I'm going home." He picked up the scroll, one-handed, tossed it, that scroll, underhand, and Iruka caught it against his chest on pure reflex. Then Naruto turned and started walking, and Iruka, on his knees, hoarse, called after him. And what he said wasn't "how did you do that?" and it wasn't "what order you wasn't stop." 3 Anbu had arrived by then, up in the branches, and every one of them heard it, and every one of them wrote it in their report, and one of them told me himself that he thinks about it maybe once a month for the rest of his life. What Iruka Umino said was, "Naruto, are you okay?" Naruto stopped. He didn't turn around. He stood there in the middle of a forest he'd rearranged with his back to the only adult in that village who had ever asked him that question, and he didn't say anything for a long time. 4 seconds. 5. Cigarette smoke going straight up in the still air. And I need you to understand what was happening in those 5 seconds, because there was a whole life in them. There was a 7-year-old with a broken wrist in a black cavern. There was 100 October 10ths. There was every time he'd said "I'm fine" to nobody, because nobody was asking. And there was a Chunin with a hole in his shoulder who had put his arms out in front of him 10 minutes ago, like Naruto was something worth standing in front of. He almost said it. Whatever it was. You could see his shoulders move. Then he walked away. Iruka sat in the dirt and cried. And I'm not going to make fun of him for it, and neither would Naruto. And that's how you know the difference between the two of them and everyone else in this story. The next morning, there was a headband on Iruka's desk with a note under it in bricklayer handwriting. "Keep the party tricks. I'll take the plate." Team assignments, room 301. Now this part's funny, and I want to enjoy it with you for a second. 27 fresh Jonin in a classroom. Everybody buzzing. Ino and Sakura fighting over a seat. Kiba trying to get Akamaru off the desk. Shikamaru asleep. Standard. And in the back corner, sitting on the windowsill with the window open and one leg hanging outside the building, a 6', 12-year-old with a headband tied around his left bicep instead of his forehead, smoking, reading a bingo book. Nobody sat within 2 rows of him. Sakura Haruno kept looking. She couldn't help it. She'd known this kid since they were 5. She remembered the loud one, the one who fell out of a tree trying to get her attention and got dirt on her sandals. And somewhere between then and now, that kid had become this. And she genuinely could not make the 2 pictures fit inside her head. Every few minutes she glanced back like she was checking whether he was still there. And every time she did it, she thought, he's going to blow up. Something's going to set him off, and he's going to blow up. Sasuke Uchiha didn't look. Deliberate choice. Arms crossed, eyes forward, chin at that angle. He'd already worked out his ranking of the room, and he'd put himself at the top of it, and he'd put the Uzumaki thing in a category called animal, and left it there because the alternative was thinking about it. And Sasuke Uchiha did not have room in his life for anything he couldn't beat. Iruka read the teams out. When he got to 7, Uzumaki Naruto, Haruno Sakura, Uchiha Sasuke, Sakura made a sound like a kettle. Half of it was joy about Sasuke. The other half was pure animal dread. Then the classroom emptied out, and Team 7 waited for their Jonin. They waited 3 hours. Sakura fumed. Sasuke brooded. Naruto finished his book, put it in his jacket, lay down across 3 desks with his boots on the wall, and went to sleep. Actually asleep, snoring, in a way that made the windows buzz. When Kakashi Hatake finally slid open that door, he did it with his whole practiced bit ready to go. One hand up, one eye crinkled to shrug. "Yo, sorry I'm late. I got lost on the road of life." Sakura and Sasuke did the thing. The glare, the "you're lying," and a voice from the back said, "You think you're tough because you wear a mask and read porn? You're a fucking joke." Kakashi's eye stopped crinkling for about a quarter of a second. Now, Kakashi Hatake had read the file. Of course he'd read the file. He'd read the sealed file, the one about the cavern, because the Hokage had personally put it in his hands 2 days earlier and said, You're the only one I trust with this, which is a hell of a thing to hear before your first Genin team. He knew the physical stats. He knew about the 4 Chunin. He knew about the Tokubetsu Jonin's hand. Reading it and having it talk to you are different experiences. He looked at the kid stretched out across the desks, genuinely bigger than half the Chunin in the village, cigarette in his teeth indoors, staring at him with an expression of total flat boredom. And Kakashi did the only thing he ever did when a situation got away from him. He smiled. "Interesting," he said. "Roof, now." The introductions on the roof went about how you'd expect. Sakura gave a speech about her likes that was mostly a coded speech about Sasuke. Sasuke gave the ambition, not dream line, and I'll admit it landed less well than usual because right after he finished saying he intended to kill a certain man, Naruto said one, and Sasuke had to sit there and not answer. Then it was Naruto's turn. Naruto Uzumaki. Likes, ramen, quality ramen. Dislikes, everything else. Dream. He stopped. Considered it for the first time in front of witnesses. Haven't picked one. "That's a little sad," Kakashi said. "That's honest." Naruto flicked Ash off the rail. "Ask me again in a year," Kakashi told him about the bell test. 2 bells, 3 Genin, 1 going back to the academy. "Come at me with intent to kill." Standard speech, standard hook. He watched their faces while he gave it. Sakura went pale. Good, she was listening. Sasuke's eyes narrowed. Good, he was competing. Naruto looked at the bells and then looked at Kakashi's throat and then looked at Kakashi's eye, and he did it in that order, and Kakashi Hatake felt something walk down the back of his neck that he had not felt since the Third War. Training Ground 3. Morning. Ready. Go. Sakura and Sasuke vanished into the tree line like they were supposed to. Naruto stayed exactly where he was, sitting on a training post. One boot on the ground, smoking. Kakashi pulled out his book. "You know, in a normal test, I'd say you're at a disadvantage sitting in the open." "Uh-huh. Aren't you gonna hide?" "From what?" Sasuke came out of the trees first, and credit where it's due. The kid was legitimately the best genin in his year, by every metric the academy had. He opened with a shuriken volley off a fishing wire, converted into a fire release fireball technique that lit up half the clearing, and followed it in with a taijutsu chain that ended in a heel drop. Kakashi caught the heel with 2 fingers. Then he had Sasuke buried up to the neck in dirt with earth release, inner decapitation technique, and he crouched down and said something friendly about how the nail that sticks out gets hammered. And Sasuke Uchiha experienced a specific humiliation that his body would forget in an hour, and his pride would carry for years. Sakura found Kakashi in the woods, got hit with a D-rank genjutsu, leaves swirling, a vision of Sasuke wounded, and passed out standing up, which honestly is a rough day at the office. Then Kakashi came back to the clearing, and the boy on the post was still on the post. "You've had 11 minutes, Kakashi said. "The clock's not your friend." Naruto looked up at the sky. Sun was about a third of the way. He dropped the cigarette, put a boot on it, and stood. And when he stood, the 2 training posts either side of him leaned, about an inch each. Away from him, Kakashi noticed. Kakashi noticed everything. He put the book away. "Come at me with intent to kill," Naruto said. "That's what you said. That's what I said. You first." Now here's what Kakashi decided in that moment, and I actually respect it. He decided this kid needed to be shown a ceiling. That's a real teaching instinct. Every young monster needs one clean afternoon where somebody older, faster, and smarter takes them apart without hurting them, so that they understand that the world has more in it than their own power. Kakashi had planned this out. He was going to body flicker in behind him, put a kunai at the throat, and say something dry, and that would be that. He used body flicker technique. He vanished. Genuinely vanished. No leaves, no smoke, the real version, a jonin closing 30 feet in a fraction of a heartbeat. He came in behind Naruto's left shoulder with a kunai reversed in his grip, already moving to the throat, already composing the line. Naruto didn't turn around. He backhanded the air. Just the air. His right arm came across his body and swung backward, loose, the way you'd wave off a fly, and the crimson went up his forearm and off his knuckles, and the air behind Naruto Uzumaki detonated. I've heard 4 people describe that sound, and they all picked the same word. Cannon. Not thunder. Thunder rolls. This cracked. A single flat concussive slam that punched a visible ring of compressed air across the clearing, tore the grass off the ground in a fan, and blew the leaves off every tree in a 40-meter arc. Kakashi was in the middle of it. He got his arm up. That's the only reason he lived, by the way, and he didn't even do it on purpose. It was pure trained reflex, guard rising to a threat his conscious mind hadn't registered. And the shockwave took him mid-air, mid-technique, at the exact moment when his body weight was committed and his feet had nothing under them. And it threw him, not knocked him back, threw him 60 feet, maybe 70, in a flat line about 4 feet off the ground, spinning, with his kunai gone somewhere into the trees. He clipped the top of a bush and it exploded. He hit the memorial stone, the Konoha Memorial Stone, that big black slab with 1,000 names cut into it. Kakashi Hatake hit it back first at a speed that cracked 3 ribs on the left, 1 on the right, and put a spiderweb fracture in the granite behind his shoulder blade. And then he slid down the face of it and stopped in a sitting position at the base with his legs out in front of him and a smear of red on the stone above his head, and he couldn't breathe. That's what he told the Hokage. That's the detail he kept coming back to in the debrief. I could not draw a breath, sir. Not from the ribs, from the shock. Kakashi Hatake Ambu, copy ninja of 1,000 techniques, survivor of a war and an Akatsuki encounter, and 11 separate S-rank engagements, sat at the base of the memorial stone with his ears ringing and his lungs locked and stared across the clearing. The boy hadn't moved from the post. He hadn't even turned around all the way. He was looking over his shoulder. He backhanded the air, Kakashi thought. He didn't look at me. He backhanded the air, and I'm on the other side of the field. Naruto walked over. Every step, the grass flattened. He crouched down in front of his brand new Jonin instructor, and Kakashi's hand twitched toward his kunai pouch and then stopped, because there was nothing in that pouch that mattered, and both of them knew it. Naruto reached out and took the front of Kakashi's vest. 2 fingers. Pulled the lip of it open like a man checking a coat for his wallet, and lifted out both bells on their strings. He held them up, looked at them. Little brass bells, jingling. Then he looked over at the dirt patch where Sasuke's head was sticking out of the ground, and at Sakura, who had just staggered out of the tree line with grass in her hair and a fresh handprint of unconsciousness on her face, and who had arrived exactly in time to see the copy ninja bleeding on the memorial stone. Naruto threw the bells at them. 1 landed in the dirt by Sasuke's chin. 1 bounced off Sakura's chest, and she caught it with both hands out of pure panic. "You two are fucking disappointments," Naruto said. "Stay out of my way and you won't get hurt." Sakura's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Sasuke, buried up to his neck, unable to move, having watched all of it from ground level, said, "You," and stopped, because there was no end to that sentence that didn't make things worse. "You're a fucking disappointment," Naruto said again, and this time he was looking right at Sasuke, just at him. "You've got the eyes, the name, the whole clan library in a house nobody's living in, and you led with a fireball. Everybody leads with a fireball." He turned. "Figure out what you actually are, or somebody's gonna do it for you." He walked back to the post, sat down, lit a cigarette. Nobody said anything for a while. There was a Jonin bleeding on a war memorial, a boy in the dirt, a girl holding a bell, and a 12-year-old smoking in the sunshine like he was on a lunch break. And Kakashi Hatake, working air back into his chest, 1 careful sip at a time, had a thought he had never had before in 20 years of shinobi service. He thought a lot of things about a lot of powerful people. He thought, how do I beat this? He thought, I need backup. He thought, I'm gonna die here twice. What he thought, sitting at the base of that stone with a smashed ribcage, watching the back of a 12-year-old boy, was, thank God he's on our side. He passed all 3 of them, said something about teamwork. Nobody was listening. Team 7's first month was D ranks, and I'm going to be brief about it because the funniest parts don't need much help. Naruto caught the Fire Daimyo's wife's cat, Tora, in 11 seconds. He found it by walking into the woods and standing still, and the cat came to him. Just walked up and sat down in front of his boots. Cats know things. When he handed it over at the mission desk, the animal was purring, and it hissed at Madame Shijimi. And Madame Shijimi looked at Naruto with the specific horror of a woman realizing her cat has picked a side. Weeding the Yamanaka's backfield, he pulled up a stump that 4 Chunin had failed to remove the previous spring. Ino watched him do it, and then watched him toss it over the fence into the street where it landed hard enough to crack the paving, and she said, very faintly, "You could have asked for a shovel." And Naruto said, "For a stump?" Painting a fence, he punched through the wall. Not on purpose. He leaned on it, and every day at the mission desk, a Chunin named Kotetsu wrote no incidents on the Team 7 report with a hand that shook a little. Sakura started talking to him around week 3. That's her whole character, honestly, and I don't think she gets enough credit for it. The girl was terrified of Naruto Uzumaki, and she talked to him anyway because she couldn't stand the silence. She'd ask about his boots or about the bingo book. Mostly she got grunts. Then one day she asked out of nowhere, "Does it hurt?" Naruto looked at her. "The red stuff," she said. "When it comes out, does it hurt?" He was silent long enough that she started apologizing. Then he said, "Not anymore." And Sakura Haruno, 12 years old, filed that word anymore into a part of her brain that would keep it for the rest of her life. Sasuke didn't talk to him. Sasuke watched him, constantly. He'd stopped sleeping properly. He was going out to Training Ground 3 at 2 in the morning and hitting posts until his knuckles split because there was a boy his age in this village who had backhanded the air and put Kakashi Hatake through a rock. And Sasuke Uchiha had spent 6 years building his entire self on the idea that he was the exception. Watching Naruto peel that off him a strip at a time, he hated it. He couldn't stop looking. Then Team 7 got a C rank, and that's when everything got serious. Tazuna the bridge builder smelled like sake at 9 in the morning and lied about the mission rank before he'd finished his first sentence. Kakashi knew. Kakashi took it anyway, and I've always thought that was because of Naruto. Because you look at your team's roster, and one of the names on it can knock a Jonin through a war memorial. And suddenly the risk math changes. They took a boat across the strait because the bridge was unfinished and the ports were watched. Fog so thick you couldn't see the bow from the stern. Everybody hunched down under a tarp, whispering. Naruto sat on the bow, legs crossed, facing forward into the white. Smoking, which the boatman quietly hated and said nothing about. Sakura whispered, "Isn't he cold?" Kakashi said, "I don't think weather applies." And Naruto sat there staring into the fog like a man waiting for something worth his time to show up. Something showed up. They'd been on the road an hour past the boat when Kakashi's eye caught a puddle. Clear day. No rain in 3 weeks. It's the oldest tell in the business, and Kakashi clocked it instantly and made a decision. Let them commit. Then take them out, see what the enemy knows. The Demon Brothers, Gozu and Meizu, missing nin of the Hidden Mist, Chunin grade with a Jonin's body count. They came up out of that puddle in a whisper of water, and they went straight for the biggest target in the formation. That's tactics. That's actually correct tactics. Kill the heavy first. Shredder gauntlet chains, a spiked razor chain, 2 ends, wrapped between 2 men. Spun up to a speed where it takes the meat off bone. They'd used it on a Kiri Hunter squad, and there hadn't been enough left to identify. They wrapped Naruto Uzumaki from shoulder to elbow, both arms in a full double coil, and they pulled. Sakura screamed. She actually screamed, out loud, because she just watched 2 grown killers wrap her teammate in a machine designed to reduce a body to parts, and there was nothing anyone could do about it. The chain took up the slack. Both brothers hauled with their full body weight and a chakra-boosted torque that had once separated a man's arm from his torso. And there was a sound like 100 coins hitting a stone floor. The chain came apart, every link, not one break. A cascade, link after link giving way down the whole length of both coils, spraying broken steel into the road. And because the ends were fixed to the gauntlets, and the gauntlets were fixed to their arms, the collapsing chain didn't just fail, it ripped backward. The recoil tore both gauntlets off both men, taking skin and 2 of Meizu's fingers with them. Gozu looked at his own bare forearm, then at the chain links in the dirt, then up. Naruto shook his arms once, and steel dust came off his jacket sleeves. "Aimed for me," he said. "That was smart." And that was the last nice thing anybody said to the Demon Brothers. He didn't charge, didn't need to. They were 3 feet away. Naruto's left hand closed on Gozu's head and his right closed on Meizu's, one each, palms over their faces, fingers around their skulls, and he lifted both men clean off the road by their heads with his arms out. Then he brought his hands together. I'm going to spare you the anatomy. What I'll tell you is the sound was wet and enormous and singular. And afterward, Naruto Uzumaki stood in the middle of the road with his hands empty. And there was a hole in the story where 2 men used to be, and Sakura Haruno turned around and threw up into a bush. Naruto let the rest of them drop, wiped his hands on his pants, that was becoming a habit, and started walking. Bridge is that way, right? Kakashi Hatake stood in the road for a second. He'd been a jonin for a long time. He'd cleaned up worse. What got him, and he wrote about this obliquely in the after action, in the way jonin write things down when they don't want a psyche val, was that Naruto had asked a question about directions. No adrenaline crash. No handshake. He killed 2 Chunin grade Nukenin in about a second and a half, and then he asked which way the bridge was, because the killing part hadn't registered as an event. That way, Kakashi said. Cool. Tazuna sat down in the road because his legs said so. Kakashi crouched next to him and asked in a voice that had gone very flat about Gato, and Tazuna told him everything. The shipping magnate, the choke on the country, the bridge that was the only way out, the fact that a C rank had been an A rank the whole time, and he'd lied because his village had spent every coin it had left. Kakashi said they were going home. Naruto, 40 feet up the road without turning around. No, we're not. This is above your grade. I said I'd guard him. Naruto flicked ash. Job's a job. Backing out's what weak people do. Kakashi looked at Sasuke. Sasuke said, we're going. He looked at Sakura, who was pale and shaking and had vomit on her sandal, and who wiped her mouth with the back of her hand and stood up straight and said, we're going, in a voice with an actual spine in it. And I want that on the record, because that girl had every reason to run, and she picked her team instead. Zabuza Momochi came for them 2 days later. On the unfinished bridge, in a fog he made himself. Hidden mist technique. The whole span went white. Visibility dropped to nothing. Sound went strange. And out of the murk came that voice. The one with a laugh underneath it. Kakashi of the Sharingan. And here I thought this was going to be dull. Then the killing intent hit, and it was real. Zabuza Momochi had killed his entire graduating class at 9 years old and gone up from there. He was the demon of the hidden mist, one of the 7 swordsmen, and his intent came down on that bridge like a slab of cold meat. Sakura's knees buckled. Tazuna made a sound. Sasuke's hands started shaking so badly, he had to grip his own wrist to hold the kunai, and Kakashi had to say his name twice to bring him back. Then Zabuza took Kakashi out of the fight in 11 seconds, because he was that good. Water clone as bait, real body from the flank, and water prison technique. A sphere of compressed water with a hand locked in it, unbreakable from inside, and Kakashi Hatake in the middle of it with his air running out and his eye wide. Run! Kakashi shouted through the water. All of you, protocol, get Tazuna and run. 4 water clones rose out of the sea over the rail, each one carrying the executioner's blade. Each one grinning through bandages. Sasuke froze. He'll deny it. He froze. Sakura got in front of Tazuna with a kunai and a grip that wouldn't have held a sandwich, and a pair of boots hit the deck of the bridge on the other side of the fog. Naruto had gone over the rail. He was walking on the water. Now, that's a chakra trick. Surface adhesion, one of the first real exercises. Naruto had no chakra, and he could do it anyway, and nobody has ever fully explained it. Best theory I've heard is from a Nara who read the sealed file. Naruto Uzumaki wasn't standing on the water. The water was refusing to be in his way. Whatever it was, the water didn't ripple under his boots. It vibrated. Fine, fast, tight little rings, like a drum skin with a bass note under it. And the crimson coming off him was bleeding into the sea. And around each footstep, the surface went white and started to boil. He walked past the water clones, straight past them. One swung at his back, and the executioner's blade bounced off his jacket, and the clone burst apart from the recoil. Zabuza saw him coming. One hand locked in the prison, holding Kakashi, and he watched a 12-year-old walk across the ocean toward him, leaving a trail of steam. Kid, Zabuza said, I've killed 100 of you. Naruto kept walking. Zabuza let the prison go. That's the detail. He let Kakashi go to deal with the kid. Kakashi fell into the water coughing, and Zabuza didn't even look at him because every instinct that had kept him alive for 25 years was screaming, and Zabuza Momochi had learned to listen to that. He took the executioner's blade in both hands. The Kubikira Baucho, head cleaver, 7 feet of iron that repaired itself with the blood of the men it killed. That blade had gone through stone. It had gone through a bridge support at Kiri. It had taken the head off a Jonin through a raised guard. Zabuza swung it with his hips and his back and every ounce of a career. Naruto leaned forward and headbutted the flat of it. The executioner's blade came apart. Not bent, not chipped. The entire weapon burst into fragments from the point of impact outward. A spray of iron shards that hissed into the sea in a wide fan, steaming, leaving Zabuza Momochi holding a hilt with 14 inches of jagged nothing on the end. He looked at it. For the first time in his entire life as a killer, the demon of the hidden mist had no idea what to do. Not fear yet. Fear was still loading. This was blanker than fear. This was a man whose entire understanding of the world had just been contradicted by a thing he was holding in his own hands. Naruto took him by the throat, one hand. He lifted Zabuza Momochi, 6'2", 190 pounds of muscle and scar tissue, straight up off the water with his arm locked out, until the man's sandals were kicking at nothing 3 feet above the sea. The water underneath them started to roll. Actual boil. Steam coming up around both of them in a column, and the crimson climbed Naruto's arm in bands like something alive, and Zabuza's hands scrabbling at a wrist that felt like a bridge cable. I'm the one who clears the path, Naruto said. Then he drove his free hand into Zabuza's chest. Here's the moment before. Zabuza's eyes going wide over the bandages, the hilt slipping out of his fingers, the fog beginning to thin because the man sustaining it had stopped concentrating. Here's the moment of no wind up, 6 inches of travel, a sound like a sledge going into a side of beef, and a burst of red mist out the man's back that went 30 feet. Here's the moment after. Naruto opened his hand and Zabuza Momochi went into the sea. The fog came apart, and the water in a 10-meter circle went the color of rust, steaming with iron fragments floating in it. Then somebody screamed. Up on the half-finished span, at the top of a support beam, a boy in a hunter nin mask was screaming. And it was the worst sound on that bridge all day. Not rage, grief with the bottom torn out of it. Demonic ice mirrors. Haku didn't even have the discipline left to form them properly. He went straight to needles. 1,000 flying water needles of death. Dozens of them, hundreds, a wall of ice lances launched off the sea itself, screaming down at Naruto from 3 angles at once. It was A-rank work. Kakashi, treading water and coughing blood, saw it and thought that would have killed me. The needles hit Naruto Uzumaki and it sounded like rain on a tin roof. They came apart, every single one. Little bursts of ice powder popping off his shoulders and his face and his chest, off his open eyes, and he stood in it and let it happen. And when it stopped, he had frost in his eyebrows and nothing else. Haku dropped to the water. The mask cracked and fell in half, and there was a boy under it. Pretty face, wet with tears, maybe 15. You, he said. He says, he was all I. Naruto walked toward him through the steam. Real men don't cry, he said. You chose to be a tool, die like one. He didn't drag it out. I'll give him that much, and I've thought about that sentence for a long time, and I still don't know if it's a kindness. He didn't drag it out. Now I want to sit with the reactions because that's where this fight actually happened. Sasuke Uchiha stood on that bridge with a kunai he never threw. He had built a whole religion out of being cold. Since he was 8 years old, he had told himself every day, I feel nothing. I need nothing. I am a blade. He'd practiced the face in the mirror. He'd cultivated the silence. He genuinely believed, walking onto that bridge, that he was the hardest person on it. Then he watched a boy his own age unmake 2 S-class threats in under a minute and ask no one for anything. And every layer of Sasuke's armor peeled off and blew away, and what was left underneath was a 12-year-old kid who felt something he had never once let himself feel. Small. Not weak. He could survive weak. Weak was a problem you trained out of. Small. Like the world was bigger than his revenge. like there was a whole scale of things above him that his eyes had never even been pointed at. He would spend the next year of his life chasing that feeling with his teeth, and it would take him to some ugly places, and every one of them started here. Sakura Haruno cried, silently, with her hand over her mouth, standing in front of a bridge builder she was supposed to be protecting. She cried for Haku, which nobody else on that bridge did, and then she hated herself for it, because she thought the tears meant she wasn't cut out for this, and she stood there hating herself with salt on her face and her feet still planted in front of the client, which is the exact definition of the thing she thought she didn't have. And Kakashi Hatake pulled himself out of the ocean, sat on the edge of the bridge with water running out of his vest, and said nothing at all. There was nothing to say. He was the ranking officer. Somewhere in his job description was guide the development of genin. He looked at the sea going pink and thought about the paperwork, and then he thought about the fact that the field report was going to read like a work of fiction. And then he thought about the fact that 100 people in a village down that road had been slowly starving for 3 years and were now abruptly free. He decided he was okay with that. Gato showed up an hour later. He'd been waiting to see how it went. Cowards always do. And he came onto the bridge with a cane and a grin and 200 men behind him. 200. That's not an estimate. The Land of Waves put up a monument later, and they counted from the bounty ledgers. Mercenaries, deserters, bandits, dock thugs, 40-odd rogue shinobi with real training, all of them armed, all of them there for a payday and a burned village. Gato tapped his cane on the deck, looked at what was left of the fog and the blood on the water and shrugged. Well, saves me his fee. He raised his voice. Kill the old man, kill the kids, take the girl, burn the town. Standard rate. The army roared and came forward, and Naruto Uzumaki stepped past his own team, walked to the mouth of the bridge, and rolled his neck. Stay back, Sakura said. Naruto, there's 200. Yeah. He dropped his cigarette on the deck. Stay back. The crimson came up. Let me set it properly, because this is the moment the whole continent starts to hear about him, and I want you to see it right. The aura went up around Naruto in a column, and the temperature on that bridge climbed 10 degrees. The fog that was left didn't drift away. It fled, rolling back off the span in every direction like something with a survival instinct. The unfinished bridge, hundreds of tons of stone and steel, began to hum under everyone's feet at a frequency that made Tazuna's teeth ache. The sea on both sides pulled back from the pilings. 200 men stopped, all at once. A wall of hired killers came to a dead halt on a bridge because the air had changed. Somebody in the middle said, "What is that?" Naruto lowered his shoulder. He moved. The first 60 men didn't get to be individuals. He went into the front rank at a speed that turned him into a red line, and the front rank ceased to be a rank. Bodies went up, out, over the rails, into the sea in a spray. He didn't swing at people. He didn't need to. He ran through them, and the momentum did the work. And behind him, the bridge deck cracked in a long, jagged seam where his boots had pushed off. Then he turned and did it again the other way. The back half of that army broke and ran, and running was pointless because you cannot outrun a law of the universe. He caught a man mid-sprint at 40 meters. He caught the next one at 90. Some of them jumped off the bridge into the water, and those are the only ones who lived, 16 of them. And every single one gave testimony, and the testimony is why the bingo book entry exists. 40 of them were shinobi. They tried. Fire release, flame bullet, hit him in the face and went out like a match in a fist. Earth release, mud wall. He went through it. The wall took longer to fall over than it took him to pass through. A 3-man wind release barrage that would have shredded a jonin, parted around him like water around a piling. One man got clever and dropped an explosive tag net, 11 tags, all at once, and the blast took out a 20-meter section of bridge and blew every window out in the nearest houses on the shore. And when the smoke cleared, Naruto Uzumaki was still walking forward through the fire with his jacket smoking. He didn't say a single word the entire time. That's the part the survivors always mention. 2 minutes, 200 men, and he never spoke. 2 minutes. That's the number. 2 minutes and 11 seconds by Kakashi's count. And Kakashi counted because it was the only thing he could think to do with his hands. At the end of it, there was a bridge that would need 6 weeks of repairs, a sea that people wouldn't fish for a month, and Gato had made it about 30 feet back toward his boat. Naruto came up behind him without any hurry at all. Gato turned around and did the thing that men like Gato always do, which is negotiate. Wait. Whatever they're paying you, I'll triple it. I own 3 shipping companies. I have accounts in 4 countries. I can make you. Naruto picked him up by the collar. You had them starve a whole country, he said, over a bridge. It's business. Yeah. And he threw him straight up. That's what he did. He threw Gato of Gato Company vertically into the sky off the end of the unfinished bridge, and the little man went up and up until he was a speck. And everybody on that bridge stood there with their heads back watching. Yeah, and there was time. There was a genuinely long amount of time before he came down into the water half a mile out. Naruto put a new cigarette in his mouth. Anybody got a light? Mine's wet. The people of the Land of Waves came out to the bridge with kitchen knives and farm tools about 10 minutes too late, led by a boy named Inari holding a crossbow he could barely hold. They came around the last support and stopped and looked. There is a statue on that bridge now. They built it that spring. It's a big man in a long coat with his shoulder down, mid-stride, and there's a bronze cigarette in his mouth. And every fisherman in that country touches its boot for luck before a bad weather run. They named the bridge the Great Naruto Bridge. Tazuna suggested it. Kakashi said, you might want to think about that. Names travel. Tazuna said, that's the idea. And it did travel. Word off that bridge went out in every direction. Through the 16 survivors, through the merchant boats, through the Kiri Hunter Nin, who came looking for Zabuza's body and found iron shards in the shallows instead. Within 2 months, there was a page in the Iwa Bingo book. And the page was mostly blank because nobody had reliable information, and the blankness was somehow worse. Name, Uzumaki Naruto. Village, Konohagakure. Rank, Genin. Threat assessment, unknown. Do not engage. Flee on sight. No confirmed method of injury, Genin. It said Genin. There's a story that the Tsuchikage read that page and laughed, and then sent for the full report, and read it twice, and stopped laughing. Naruto slept the whole boat ride home. He'd bought 40 cigarettes in Wave with mission pay, and traded a mercenary's knife for a bowl of noodles. And he sat on the bow again on the way back with the wind in his face, and Sakura sat about 6 feet away from him instead of 12, which for her was 100 miles. She said, why'd you throw him up? Wanted to see if he'd scream the whole way. Did he? Yeah. Sakura sat with that for a second. Then, and she surprised herself, good. Naruto looked over at her. It was maybe the second time he'd properly looked at her. Huh, he said. That was the whole conversation. It was a start. The Chunin exams came a month later, and Kakashi entered all 3 of them, and there is a note in his file next to that decision that just says see attachment. The attachment is 11 pages long. Konoha filled up with foreign shinobi. Sand, sound, grass, rain, waterfall. 211 Genin in the first exam hall, and every one of them walked in doing the thing you do, reading the room, measuring the competition, picking out threats. Naruto walked in, sat down in his assigned seat, and opened a bingo book. He never looked up. Not once. 210 of the sharpest young shinobi in the world spent 40 minutes sizing each other up, and the biggest person in the room read a paperback with his boots crossed at the ankle. Half the hall clocked him as arrogant. The sand team clocked him as something else because Tamari had done her homework, and there was a page in her folder about a bridge. Ibiki Marino came in and did his intimidation bit. 10 questions, 5-point deduction system, cheat and get thrown out, whole team goes with you. The proctors handed out the papers. Naruto looked at question 1, looked at question 2, put his pencil down, leaned back, folded his arms, and closed his eyes. Sakura, 3 rows over, watched him do this and had a small internal collapse. He didn't answer a single question. Not one. 45 minutes of the most difficult written exam in the shinobi world, and the man went to sleep. And one of the Chunin observers marked his sheet and then marked it again, and then went and had a whispered conversation with Ibiki, and Ibiki said, leave him. Then Ibiki dropped the 10th question. The whole speech, Take it and fail forever, or quit now and try again next year. And if you take it and get it wrong, you're a genin for life. 26 teams walked out. The pressure in that room was enormous. Sakura's hand actually came up off the desk, for Sasuke's sake, and stopped. And a chair scraped. Naruto Uzumaki stood up without being called on, in the middle of Ibiki Morino's carefully constructed psychological trap, and opened one eye. Stay, obviously. He sat back down. Next question. Nobody breathed for a second. Then Ibiki Morino, head of Konoha's torture and interrogation force, a man who had held out against 3 days of the Iwa question, started to laugh. Big honest laugh, hand on his scarred head. You all pass. And the second exam was announced, and Naruto went back to his book. Ibiki's report on the written exam has one line about Naruto, and it's my favorite line in the whole archive. Subject scored 0. Recommend advancement. He understood the question the way it was meant, which is more than the ones who wrote answers did. Training Ground 44. The Forest of Death. Anko Mitarashi gave the speech, waved the consent forms, put a kunai in her own cheek for flavor. 5 days, 2 scrolls, 26 teams, only about half get out. Gate opened. Sasuke went up into the canopy immediately. Sakura followed. Naruto walked in. Just walked. Hands in his jacket pockets, no hurry, boots on the trail like a man going to the store. He looked up at the trees, the giant ones, the ones as big around as houses, and he stopped for a minute and had a smoke and listened. Bugs. Water somewhere. Something big moving in the underbrush a long way off, deciding against it. And Naruto Uzumaki, 12 years old, genuinely thought, that the Forest of Death was nicer than Konoha's main market at noon. Fewer people, better air, nobody crossing the street. He was in a pretty good mood, actually. Which is why what happened next went the way it did. He heard screaming, half a mile east. A girl's voice, and it wasn't the panic kind. It was the drowning kind. Naruto tilted his head, and then he was moving, and he crossed that half mile in about 9 seconds, and trees leaned in his wake. Here's what he came into. Rain Country Genjutsu team. Oboro, Mubi, and Kagari. Real specialists. Layered illusion work, the kind you can't punch because you can't find it. Their whole thing was a compound technique. Hell's viewing mist, layered over a mud swamp illusion. Their targets stopped being able to tell up from down and then drowned in 3 inches of dirt, while their brains screamed 20 feet of swamp. They'd hit Team 8. Kiba Inuzuka was face down and unconscious. Akamaru whining in circles around him, unable to find him by scent because the illusion had rewritten what his nose was reporting. Shino Aburame stood upright, locked in place, buried under 3 separate genjutsu layers so thick that his own Kikaichu had lost track of their host and were crawling in confused spirals on his sleeve. Shino Aburame, who had never once been outthought by a genin, couldn't tell which direction his own body was pointing, and Hinata Hyuga was on the ground. Cut across the temple, bleeding into her eye, both hands in the mud, gasping. Her Byakugan was active. That's the horror of it. Her eyes could see everything. Her eyes were telling her with absolute clarity that there was 20 feet of swamp above her, and she was drowning, and her lungs believed it, and she was suffocating on air. She'd been screaming for her teammates. She'd stopped being able to. Naruto walked into the mud field, and the illusion peeled off him like paint in a fire. Because here's the mechanical truth of Naruto, Uzumaki, and Genjutsu, and it's the reason 100 sensory specialists lost sleep over him. Illusion needs chakra to reach into a nervous system, and it needs chakra to stay there. His aura was the flat opposite of foreign chakra. It ate it, converted it, threw it off as heat and pressure. The Crimson didn't fight the technique. It denied it a place to stand. The swamp went out around him in a widening circle, like a light coming on. 10 feet, 30, 50. The mud unraveled into what it actually was, a forest floor with a few puddles on it. Hinata's lungs got air. She rolled onto her side and pulled a breath so hard it hurt. Shino came out of it staggering. His bugs went straight back to his sleeves like they'd been called. He looked around, found the boy standing in the middle of the clearing with red light crawling on his shoulders, and Shino Aburame, who had a hypothesis for everything, had no hypothesis. Oboro materialized out of a tree behind Naruto with a fan of kunai already leaving his hand. 8 of them. Center mass and spine, Naruto didn't turn around. The kunai hit the aura 18 inches from his back and stopped. Just stopped, dead in the air, and hung there for half a second and dropped straight down into the leaves like insects off a windshield. Then he turned around, slow, and he looked at Oboro. Oboro was a professional. He tried a body replication, 3 copies, standard misdirection, by 2 seconds. Naruto walked through the middle copy and it popped, and then he bent down and took the real one by the ankle. He picked Oboro up upside down, adjusted his grip, and swung him. The first hit was Kagari, coming in from the left, and Naruto hit Kagari with Oboro at about the pace of a man clearing brush. The sound was awful. Both of them went into a tree and the tree lost bark. Mubi ran. Naruto covered 30 feet and swung again, and Mubi did a lot of tumbling. Then he did it twice more, because the first 2 hadn't fully stopped. And by then Oboro had gone limp in his hand, and Naruto looked at him and set him down on the leaves with something almost like courtesy. The clearing afterward. 3 rain genin in 3 different postures of ruin. A fallen branch the width of a barrel that had come down when something hit it. Kunai scattered in the dirt, and an Aburame standing very still. Naruto walked over to Hinata. She was up on one elbow, blood running down her cheek, hair stuck to her face, staring up at him. And she couldn't process it. Truly couldn't. There was a boy standing over her who had removed 3 enemy shinobi in about 11 seconds, using one of them as the tool. And he wasn't out of breath, and he was 6 inches taller than her father. She was shaking. Whole body. He reached down and grabbed her arm and hauled her upright. One motion, no ceremony. The way a man picks up change, he dropped on a counter. Her feet found the ground. Her legs held. "Stop shaking," he said. "If you're going to survive, act like it." Then he let go and turned and walked off east. Now, I need to talk about Hinata Hyuga for a minute, because everybody skips this part, and this part is one of the most important things in the whole story. Hinata had been told what she was since she was 3 years old. Gentle, soft, kind. Those were the words, and in the Hyuga compound those words meant insufficient. Her father had said it plainly, more than once, in a room with her sister in it. You lack the will. Her cousin looked at her like she was a waste of a bloodline. Kurenai handled her like glass. Every single adult in her life had, in some way, communicated the same message. You are the type of person who needs protecting. And she had believed it, because when you're 11 and everyone agrees, you believe it. Then she got dropped into a mud illusion and drowned on dry land, and the most frightening human being she had ever been near walked out of the trees and took the whole thing apart without appearing to try, and then hauled her off the ground and told her to act like she was going to survive. Not "Are you all right?" Not "Stay behind me." Not "I'll protect you." Act like it. Something moved in her chest and it didn't have a name yet. Part of it was straight fear. She was still shaking. She stood there for a full minute after he left, shaking. Part of it was awe, the clean kind, the kind you feel watching lightning hit close. And part of it was something that had never happened to her before, which was the idea that maybe the answer wasn't being protected better. Maybe the answer was becoming the kind of thing that doesn't need it. She wiped the blood off her face with the back of her hand. She went and woke up Kiba roughly without apologizing for it. And when Shino said, "We should withdraw and treat our injuries," Hinata Hyuga said, "No, we need a scroll." Shino looked at her for a long moment. Understood. Team 8 passed the second exam with 11 hours to spare, and they did it because a girl who had been told she was gentle her whole life got told one time to act like she was going to survive. She kept the arm he'd grabbed clean of the mud, didn't wash that sleeve for a week. Make of that what you will. Orochimaru found Team 7 on the second afternoon. I want to properly frame the entrance because it deserves it. He came in as a grass genin, the disguise, the wide straw hat, the too long tongue, and the first thing that happened wasn't an attack. The first thing that happened was that the forest went silent, not still, silent. The insects stopped, the birds had already left. A forest that size makes noise all day long, and the noise switched off in a wave, and Sakura noticed it a full 4 seconds before she saw anything and got goosebumps up both arms. Then the killing intent landed. You've heard people talk about killing intent. This was the real article, from one of the 3 most dangerous people alive, a man who had personally killed more shinobi than most villages had on the roster. It came down like a slab. Sasuke Uchiha dropped to his knees and vomited into the leaves. His Sharingan wasn't even awake yet, and his body was showing him his own death on a loop, over and over, a kunai through his skull, in high detail. And he couldn't turn it off, and he couldn't make his hands work, and he had a moment of absolute clarity where he understood that he was about to die on the ground in his own sick. Sakura's vision went white. She stayed standing somehow on a technicality. She'd tell you later she doesn't remember 30 seconds of it. 3 miles away, Kakashi Hatake stopped mid-stride on a branch, went cold and started running. And Naruto Uzumaki reached into his jacket and got a cigarette out. The killing intent hit him too. It absolutely did. That's the part I like. It wasn't that it missed him. It landed on him full weight, and the crimson took it and turned it and threw it off as heat, the way a furnace deals with a lit match. Naruto felt something press on him, and then he felt it stop, and by then, he had his cigarette going. He stepped in front of his team. Orochimaru stood in the middle of the clearing under the straw hat and looked at the boy standing straight in the pressure that had put an Uchiha on his knees. Something in Orochimaru's chest did a thing it hadn't done in a very long time. It got interested. "My," he said in that wet voice, "you're the one from the bridge." "You smell like formaldehyde and bullshit," Naruto said. "I have to stop for a second. I have to. Because that's Orochimaru of the Sannin, the man who invented 3 forbidden techniques, who had a hand in 5 villages worth of atrocity, who Hiruzen Sarutobi couldn't bring himself to kill, and a 12-year-old chain smoker met him for the first time and led with a comment about his personal hygiene. Sasuke, on his knees in the dirt, heard it, and some tiny part of him wanted to laugh, and the laugh got stuck somewhere and turned into a sob. Orochimaru's smile went off his face. "I came for the Uchiha," he said, "but I do believe I'll take a sample of you as well. Hold still." And his neck came apart, extending neck technique. His head launched forward on a column of vertebrae 8 feet long, mouth opening wider than a mouth should, and out of his throat came the Kusanagi, the sword of heaven, a blade with an unmeasured cutting limit, sharp enough that Orochimaru had once used it to cut a lightning bolt in half over the Valley of the End, a weapon that had gone through Susanoo-grade defense and out the other side. He put the whole length of it through Naruto's stomach. Sakura screamed. The Kusanagi bent, 90 degrees, right at the tip. The sword of heaven folded like a length of soft wire against the skin of a 12-year-old boy's abdomen, and the force of the thrust drove Orochimaru's own extended neck into a hard stop. The clearing went totally still. Naruto looked down at the bent blade against his shirt, poked it with a finger, looked back up, and Orochimaru, 300 years of accumulated intelligence, centuries of cold, careful research, a man whose defining trait was that he was never surprised because he had already considered everything, broke. Impossible. Naruto grabbed him by the hair. "I don't suffer from PTSD," he said. "I cause it." And he threw the right hand, full crimson. Everything. The aura came up his arm and off his shoulder in a wave that flattened the underbrush for 20 feet in every direction, and the punch traveled about 2 feet. And what happened at the end of those 2 feet is the reason there is now a mile-long clearing in Training Ground 44 that the groundskeepers call the corridor. The impact took Orochimaru's head, shoulder, and the entire right side of his upper body and turned all of it into a shockwave. He didn't fly. He got deleted from the location. One instant there was a Sannin, and the next instant there was a tunnel, a straight line punched through the densest old-growth forest in the Land of Fire, and the trees along that line came apart in sequence with a sound like an artillery barrage rolling away into the distance. 1 tree, 2, 5, 20, 60. The sound kept going after the sight was gone, banging away east through the forest for 4 full seconds, and each bang was a 100-year-old tree ceasing to exist. Then a long, long silence, and then, from very far away, one final crash. Kakashi Hatake arrived 9 seconds later. He came down into the clearing already drawing a kunai, Sharingan uncovered, expecting to fight the worst thing he had ever fought. And he found 1 genin vomiting, 1 genin sitting down very slowly, One genin standing there smoking in a hole in the world. Kakashi turned and looked down the corridor. You could see daylight at the end of it, straight through a mile of forest. What did he use? Kakashi said. His voice came out strange. His neck, said Naruto. What did you use? Naruto looked at his own right hand, rolled the wrist. This. What happened at the far end of the corridor is worth telling, because it's the first time anyone had ever done that to Orochimaru, and it changed the shape of the entire war that was coming. The body couldn't hold. That was the thing. Orochimaru's whole immortality game ran on transferring into vessels, and vessels have limits, and this one had been reduced past every one of them in a fraction of a second. He lay in the wreckage of 60 trees with an arm that pointed the wrong way and a skull that was more suggestion than structure. And he did the only thing left. He shed it. Living corpse reincarnation, forced, sloppy, and out of the ruined mouth came a white snake the length of a man. And it went into the undergrowth, and it did not stop going for 11 miles. Kabuto found him that night at the safe house. What he found was his master in a spare body, sitting on the floor instead of a chair, staring at nothing. My lord, the Uchiha. Kabuto's glasses caught the light. My lord? Cancel the seal. Cancel the approach. Orochimaru's hand was on his own stomach over the spot, and his voice had a thing in it Kabuto had never heard. There's another one there. The Uzumaki boy, yes, the bridge report. The bridge report is wrong. The bridge report is conservative. He looked up and his eyes were wide up and he wasn't blinking. Kabuto, I put the Kusanagi through him. It bent. He touched me one time. One. He laughed once, and it was not a good laugh. And do you know what the worst part is? He was bored. He was bored, Kabuto. He put a cigarette out. That's on the record because Kabuto wrote it down. Kabuto wrote everything down. The invasion still happened. Orochimaru still came because his ego was bigger than his fear and because he had already promised the sand. But he changed the plan, and the change is important. He moved the whole operation up by 3 weeks. He assigned 2 teams to track and avoid rather than engage, and in the margin of the tactical map, next to the stadium, he wrote 4 words in his own hand. Do not wake it. And Sasuke Uchiha never got the cursed seal. Think about that for a second. Everything that came after in the version of this story you might have heard somewhere else. The defection, the sound for, the valley of the end. All of that grew out of a bite on Sasuke's neck in a forest, and it never happened, because Naruto Uzumaki punched a Sannin a mile into the trees before the man got around to it. Sasuke sat in that clearing, unmarked, unenhanced, with no shortcut in his neck and nothing on offer. And that was worse for him, genuinely worse, because a shortcut would have given him something to hold. Instead, he had to sit there with the plain, unpadded truth. A boy his own age, in his own team, wearing his own headband, had done in 1 second what Sasuke Uchiha's entire clan legacy could not have done in an hour. He went home from that exam and read every scroll in the Uchiha compound. All of them. He didn't sleep for 4 days. And when his Sharingan woke up, and it did, 2 weeks later in the prelims, off of Sound Kunoichi's needle, it woke up because of Naruto, and Sasuke knew it, and that knowledge sat in him like a stone. Kakashi filed his report that night and requested an emergency meeting with the Hokage. And in that meeting, 3 council elders used the word containment, and Danzo Shimura used the word asset. And the 3rd Hokage sat and listened to all of it with his pipe unlit for the 2nd time in 5 years. Then Hiruzen said, "You are all discussing a boy who has to date defended this village 3 times without being asked. Understand what you are proposing, and understand that if you propose it out loud in the wrong room, there is no version of the next week that any of us survive." Danzo said, "There is always a..." Danzo, the old man looked up. The Kusanagi bent. They tabled it. They'd bring it back later. People like that always do preliminary rounds. 8 days later, the prelims got run underground, in that big arena with the balconies and the 2 statue hands making the seal of confrontation. And the stands were packed. Every Jonin sensei, the whole Proctor Corps, 3 visiting dignitaries, the Kazekage in his robes and veil, and the 3rd Hokage front and center. 20 genin left. 10 matches, Naruto's name came up on the board 4th. Uzumaki Naruto versus Kinuta Dosu. The reaction in the stands is documented in 4 separate memoirs. Asuma Sarutobi said one word, ah. Kurenai Yuhi put a hand on Hinata's shoulder without noticing she was doing it. Guy leaned forward on the rail with both hands. Kakashi Hatake, who had 2 ribs still strapped, said to nobody in particular, somebody should tell him. Nobody told him. Dosu Kinuta walked down onto the arena floor with his one visible eye and his bandages and the melody arm on his right forearm, that big perforated gauntlet, tuned, tested, and genuinely nasty. And he had every reason for confidence, which is what makes this so good. Because the melody arm was smart. It wasn't a hitting weapon. It amplified sound and drove it through the target's inner ear. And once you're in someone's inner ear, you own their balance, their vision, their stomach, and eventually their brain. Dosu had used it to drop a jonin in Sound's own trials. Muscle was irrelevant to it. Strength was irrelevant to it. He had, on paper, the perfect counter to a boy built like a wall. He'd done the homework. He'd read the bridge report. And he'd come to a conclusion that was completely logical and completely wrong. He's a brute. Brutes have ears. Interesting matchup, Dosu said. You rely on brute force. I will destroy your inner ear. Naruto put his cigarette out on his own palm. He didn't do it as a bit. He just finished it. But the whole arena saw a 12-year-old snuff a lit cigarette against his bare hand without a flicker, and the temperature of the room dropped. Hayate Gecko raised his hand, coughed, begin. Dosu went straight to it. No feints, no closing. He raised the gauntlet, poured chakra into the resonator, and fired. Resonating echo drill, full output. A concentrated sound wave, invisible, that hit like a nail through the temple. It crossed the arena in a blink and slammed into Naruto Uzumaki's head from 6 meters out. And it died. I mean died. The crimson field around Naruto was dense enough that the wave hit it and stopped propagating. The energy went in and came out as a faint red shimmer and a warmth in the air and absolutely nothing else. No ringing, no vertigo, zero effect. Naruto's hair didn't move. He tilted his head. Not in pain. In curiosity, like a man who heard a noise in another room. Do it again. Dosu did it again. Both barrels, full arm, everything he had, and this time he screamed with the effort of it. Nothing. And you could watch it happen from the balconies. The exact second Dosu Kinuta understood that the one weapon he had built his entire identity around, the thing that made him more than a thug, was a party trick to this person. His arm was still up. He didn't lower it. He'd stopped being able to think of what to do with it. Naruto started walking, 6 meters. He took it slow, and that was the worst thing he could have done, and he knew it. Every step he took, Dosu took one back. Step, step back, step, step back, until Dosu's shoulders hit the arena wall, and there was nowhere left, and he fired the melody arm one more time from a range of 4 feet, point blank, and Naruto walked into it and reached out and put his hand around the gauntlet. He looked Dosu in the eye, and then he closed his hand slowly. Slowly. That's the part. He gave the man 1 full second to understand. 1 second, so that Dosu Kinuta could feel the metal begin to give under those fingers and could do all the fast, hopeless thinking a person does at the end. Then he crushed it. The melody arm folded inward like a paper cup, and it didn't fold into empty space because there was an arm inside it. Metal and bone went together. The sound was a wet grinding, and it kept going for about 2 seconds, and Dosu Kinuta made a noise that people in that arena described, years later, as the worst sound they'd ever heard from a human being. Watch the stands. Hayate Gecko's hand went to his mouth. The proctor, the man whose job it was to stop matches. Tamari of the Sand grabbed her brother's arm, grabbed it, hard, without looking, and Kankuro didn't shake her off, and neither of them said anything. And Gaara at the end of the row was staring at the arena floor with his mouth slightly open. And for the first time in his life, the voice in his head had gone silent. Sakura Haruno turned her face into Kakashi's flak jacket. Kakashi let her. Kurenai covered Hinata's eyes with her hand. And Hinata Hyuga, very gently, took her sensei's wrist and moved it away. And kept watching. Ino was crying. Choji had stopped eating. Shikamaru said, "That's not a genin." And Asuma said, "I know." And Shikamaru said, "No, sensei. That's not a person." Neji Hyuga's Byakugan was active. He turned it on the moment the match started out of habit, expecting to see the usual pathways, flow, the pretty blue tree everybody's got. He was looking at a hole in the world. Naruto Uzumaki had no chakra network. Nothing. Where a body's system should be, there was a mass of red that his eyes couldn't resolve, roaring, filling the outline of a person, and looking at it too long made Neiji's head hurt. He turned the Byakugan off. Then he turned it on again to check. Then he sat back and, for the first time in his life, quit thinking about fate for an entire minute. Down on the floor, Dosu had gone to his knees. Naruto let go of what was left of the gauntlet. Then he put his boot on Dosukenuta's chest and pushed down, once, direct, final. He stood there for a second in the middle of that arena. Then he looked up at the balconies, all of them, the Jonin, the elders, the Kage, the Kazekage in his veil, and he looked at every single one of them the way you look at furniture. Nobody spoke. Hayate Gecko cleared his throat. He was supposed to say winner. He had a whole script. What he actually said was, Uzumaki Naruto advances, and his voice cracked on it, and there wasn't a person in that room who blamed him. Nobody disqualified him. Nobody suggested it. The rules said matches ended by death, surrender, or proctor's call, and the technicalities of what had just happened were something the exam committee would argue about for 6 months and never publish. Naruto walked up the stairs back to the balcony and sat down on the rail with his back to the arena. He lit a cigarette. Indoors, in a sealed underground facility, standing next to a Jonin sensei and 30 feet from the Hokage, and nobody told him to put it out. Kakashi glanced over. You know that's a fire hazard. Yep, right? Later that day, Sasuke fought and woke his Sharingan. Later still, Hinata Hyuga fought her cousin Neji, and I want to tell you about it in one paragraph, because it's the only place in this whole story where somebody who isn't Naruto does something that matters. She lost. Of course she lost. Neji was 3 years ahead of her, and gifted and vicious, and he shut down her heart's pathways and put her on the floor coughing blood. But she got up 4 times. 4. And the 4th time, Kurenai was on her feet screaming for the proctor to call it. And Hiyashi Hyuga was standing at the rail with his hands white on the wood, and Hinata stood up with blood on her chin and said, I'm going to survive this. And Neji faltered. One step. He faltered, because he had never seen that in her and had no explanation for it. She went down for good a moment later, and the medics carried her out. From the far end of the balcony, without turning his head, Naruto Uzumaki said one word, better. She was unconscious. She didn't hear it. Kiba did though. And Kiba told her in the hospital 3 days later, and Hinata Hyuga went the color of a stop sign and had to put the blanket over her face. And honestly, good for her. The month between the prelims and the finals is where the rest of the world started making decisions about Naruto Uzumaki. Kakashi tried to train him for about 4 hours. Practical man. He sat Naruto down at training ground 3 and said, all right, show me what you can't do. Naruto said, chakra. Show me. So Naruto put his hands in the ram seal and sat there and nothing happened, and Kakashi watched with the Sharingan uncovered and saw nothing. No flow. No gathering. A void in the shape of a boy with a red storm where a system should be. He'd read the file. Seeing it was different. Can you climb a tree without hands? Yeah. Water? Yeah. Can I ask how? Naruto thought about it. Genuinely thought, which he didn't do much out loud. It's not that I'm holding on, he said. It's that stuff gets out of the way. Water, air, rock. He flicked his cigarette. It's all the same amount of in the way. Kakashi sat down on the grass next to him, 2 ribs still strapped. He decided right there to stop trying to teach this boy how to fight. Then I'll teach you something else, he said. Come here. I want to show you how to read a battlefield. Where the civilians are. Which direction the wounded go. Where a commander stands. He tapped the ground. You can already end anything you can reach. Nobody's ever going to teach you a better punch. But there's going to be a day when there are 2 things happen at once and you have to pick. And if you pick wrong, people you like are going to be dead in the wrong direction. Naruto looked at him for a long time. People I like, he repeated. Sure, you've got maybe 4. That's more than I had at your age. That's the first real conversation those 2 ever had, and it's the seed of everything they became to each other. Kakashi Hatake, 1 month after being put through a war memorial, sat in the grass with the boy who did it and taught him where to stand. Naruto learned it, took to it, actually. Turns out a person who's read every page of 4 bingo books has been studying strategy for years and calling it reading. Meanwhile, Sasuke went off with Kakashi for the Chidori and came back with a technique and a chip on his shoulder the size of a door. He and Naruto had one conversation that month at the gate of Training Ground 3, and here it is in full. Fight me. No. Fight me, Uzumaki. Naruto walked past him, stopped, looked back. You want to know where you are. He put a cigarette in his mouth. Fine. If we fought right now, you'd die. Not lose. Die. First thing I threw would kill you, because I don't have a setting where it doesn't. He lit it. So go get strong enough that I have to think about it. Then ask me again, and I'll say yes. And Sasuke Uchiha, who had spent that entire month building himself a reason to hate this boy, found that he couldn't. He stood at that gate for a long time. And then he went and trained, and I mean trained, and he did not go looking for a snake in the woods, because the snake was busy being afraid. Jiraiya of the Sannin came to Konoha that month, 3 weeks early, because his spy network had lit up like a signal fire. He stood on the roof of the Hokage residence and read the sealed cavern file with a face that got progressively worse. Sensei, do you know what Cyttorak is? I do not. Neither do I, and that's the problem, because I found the name in a scroll in Mount Myoboku that predates the sage. Jiraiya put the file down. The frogs won't talk about it. Fukasaku heard the word and went the color of a lemon and told me to drop it. Hiruzen packed his pipe. And your assessment of the boy? My assessment, Jiraiya said, is that we should be extremely, extremely nice to him. He met Naruto 4 days later at a hot spring, doing his whole Toad Sage entrance off a wall, and Naruto looked at him and said, "You're Jiraiya. Bingo book says you took an S-rank bounty in Kusa in 3 minutes." Jiraiya blinked. "You've read my page? I've read everybody's page." Naruto sat down in the water. "Yours is one of the good ones." And that, a compliment from him, is why Jiraiya of the Sannin decided in about 4 seconds to attach himself to this kid for the rest of his life. He didn't teach him to fight either. He taught him seals and history and how to spot a lie in a written report and how to talk to people you need something from. He also told him about his parents. That happened in a tea house at night, and it's the only time in the first part of this story that Naruto Uzumaki went silent for more than 5 seconds. "Your father," Jiraiya said, "was Minato Namikaze, 4th Hokage. Your mother was Kushina Uzumaki, and she'd have liked you, and she'd have thrown you through a wall for smoking." Naruto sat with his hands flat on the table. "He's the one who put the fox in me. He is, because there was nobody else. Because there was nobody else, and because he thought you'd be able to carry it." Jiraiya poured tea neither of them drank. "For what it's worth, kid, you did something with it he never planned for." Long pause. Long pause. "Was he strong?" "He was the strongest man I ever knew." Naruto looked out the window at the Hokage monument, at the 4th face on it, and his jaw worked once. "Then he should have come back," he said. "And that's the whole thing, isn't it? That's the entire man in one sentence. Not he abandoned me. Not I forgive him. Just he should have come back," said by a boy who'd been walking home alone since he was 4. Jiraiya didn't have an answer. There isn't one. He put a hand on the kid's shoulder, and Naruto let him, which was the largest thing that happened in that room. The finals filled the stadium. Every seat. Daimyo, feudal lords, merchant princes, 4 Kaji-level guests, the Kazekage sitting beside the Hokage under an awning. 60,000 people came to watch children fight, and most of them came for one specific reason, because word had gotten out of the prelims, and word had gotten out of Wave, and there was a name on the card that made people buy tickets from scalpers at 4 times face. Naruto's first match was against Neji Hyuga. It lasted 9 seconds, and I'll give you all of it. Neji activated the Byakugan, looked at the red hole in the world again, and said, "There's nothing in you to close. My techniques will do nothing." "Nope!" "Then I forfeit." The stadium made a noise. Jinma the proctor said, "Are you certain?" "I am not going to die for a tournament," Neji said, and walked off the field with his head up. And honestly, that's the smartest thing any Hyuga has ever done. Naruto watched him go and gave him a nod, and Neji got that nod and carried it around for years. Then Sasuke's match. Then Shikamaru's, which he also forfeited, but for entirely Shikamaru reasons. And then Right as the semifinal was announced, the feathers started falling. Temple of Nirvana technique. Genjutsu mass application, wide as the whole stadium. 60,000 civilians and half the shinobi in attendance went to sleep sitting up. On the roof of the Kaji box, a purple barrier snapped into place around the third Hokage and the Kazekage, and the Kazekage's veil came off, and the face under it was pale and long and smiling. The invasion of Konoha had started. I'll give you the shape of it fast, because Naruto's part in this doesn't take long. Sound forces came over the north wall and out of 3 tunnels under the market. Sand shinobi hit the east gate and the academy. 2 giant snakes came up through the middle of the residential district and took out an apartment block. Anko and Hibiki went to the tunnels. Kakashi and Guy took the stadium. Asuma and Kurenai went after the sleepers. Somewhere above it all, on a rooftop inside a barrier, an old man in a hat took off his robes and told his student he'd made a terrible mistake 12 years ago, and it was time to correct it. And in the middle of the panic, on the roof of the stadium's east wing, stood one genin who hadn't been touched by the sleep genjutsu. Because of course he hadn't. Naruto Uzumaki watched Konoha go up. He watched a sound squad kick in a door on 3rd Street. He watched the 2 snakes wreck a block. He watched civilians pour out of the stadium tunnels screaming and a sand team wait for them at the bottom. He watched all of it with a cigarette going and an expression of total, monumental indifference. Then he heard the roar. Out past the east wall, in the forest, and it wasn't a snake, and it wasn't a summon anybody recognized. It was low and enormous, and it went on for 11 seconds, and it cracked stone in the outer wall a mile from the source. Gaara of the desert had lost control. He'd been running on empty for a week. Naruto had put a hairline crack in him at the prelims. The boy who existed only to prove his existence through killing had watched something kill better than he could, and it had broken his whole religion. Then Sasuke had bloodied him in the finals. And then the invasion signal went off, and Gaara's mother's voice screamed in his head, and he stopped holding the door shut. Incomplete Biju transformation. Sand came up out of the ground in the eastern forest in a rising column, hundreds of tons of it, and it kept coming, and it took a shape. The one-tailed Shikaku stood up over the tree line. 200 feet of compressed sand shaped like a raccoon dog, out of a nightmare, with black spirals on its arms and eyes with no whites, and Gaara's body fused into its forehead like a wart. It roared again, and the sound flattened a stand of trees, and every window on the east side of Konoha blew inward, and every competent shinobi in that village was already busy. Hiruzen was inside a barrier fighting his own student and 2 dead Hokage. Kakashi and Guy were pinned in the stadium with 300 enemy. Asuma and Kurenai were 4 blocks deep in a running fight. The Anbu were split 6 ways. There was nobody left. Nobody at all. Konoha's response to a rampaging tailed beast on that specific afternoon was going to be 26 chunin and a prayer, and everyone who could do the math had already done it. On the roof of the east wing, Naruto looked at the monster. He looked at it for about 3 seconds. Then he dropped his cigarette. I want to slow down here because this is the moment and I want you to have all of it. He didn't call a summon. He had none. He didn't make a hand sign. He had never made one in his life. There was no gathering of chakra, no cry of a technique name, no wind up and no plan. Naruto Uzumaki lowered his shoulder and the crimson came up all the way. Understand? Everything you have seen from him so far was the idol. The low hum. 5 years of a background whisper that bent kunai and dented walls. Nobody had ever seen him actually open the valve, because nothing had ever required it. The aura went up off that roof in a pillar. The stadium's east wing lost its tiles. All of them blown off in a ring, spinning away into the streets. The pillar climbed 100 feet, then 300, then higher. A column of red light standing over Konoha like something planted there, and it was visible from the border. That's documented. Farmers in the land of hot water, 90 miles away, saw a red light on the southern horizon that afternoon and thought a mountain had opened. Every shinobi in Konoha stopped for 1 second. All of them. Every single one, on both sides. Kakashi Hatake, mid-fight, blocking a sword with a kunai, felt the pressure change and turned his head and said, "Oh!" Guy said, "It's that! That's Naruto!" Inside the purple barrier, Orochimaru's head snapped around, and Hiruzen Sarutobi watched his student's face and, for the first time in that fight, smiled. "Ah," the old man said. "You wrote something on your map, didn't you?" Naruto leapt. He didn't jump and arc. He didn't leap and float. The roof of the east wing collapsed. The whole structure gone, blown down into the seats below by the push, and Naruto Uzumaki went off it in a straight, flat-out screaming line, hypersonic, and the air came apart around him in a white cone, and the sound of it arrived 4 seconds late and broke every remaining window in a mile, a crimson missile, aimed at the chest of a tailed beast. Shukaku saw him coming. The beast reared back, and its whole torso compressed, and its chest hollowed, and it fired. Wind release, drilling air bullet. Compressed air, spun to a drill, at Shukaku's scale, the version of that technique that had once hollowed out the side of a mountain in the land of wind and left a crater you can still visit. It came out of that mouth as a visible spiral of white, and it filled the sky between them, and it was headed straight down the line Naruto was flying. Naruto flew directly into it. He didn't dodge. He didn't go around. Understand why. Not pride, not showmanship. It was because he couldn't. That's the law. Once Naruto Uzumaki starts moving, he does not stop and he does not turn, and nothing intervenes. The gem in his blood makes exactly one promise, and the promise is forward. The drilling air bullet met the Juggernaut in motion 200 feet above the eastern forest. There was a compression first, a half second where the air itself went white and solid between them, where the wind technique piled up against the front of him and could not get past and could not get around. The sound of it was enormous, a rising shriek that dropped every leaf off every tree beneath them. Then it came apart. The drilling air bullet tore open around him like paper around a cannonball. The spiral split, blew out sideways in 2 enormous rolling waves that flattened 4 acres of forest on either side, and Naruto Uzumaki came out the front of it doing the same speed he went in at, on fire with red light, and he had not slowed down by 1 mile an hour. Shukaku had time to make a sound. Then Naruto hit it in the chest. Now, there's no good word for what happened next, and I've been thinking about it since I started telling you this. So let me just give you the facts and let them do the work. It wasn't an explosion. Explosions push out from a middle. This was one direction. A wall of kinetic force that started at Naruto's shoulder and went east, and everything in that direction stopped existing in its previous arrangement. The sand armor went first. Shukaku's whole defense, layer on layer of compressed sand, tightened by a Biju's chakra, a wall that had shrugged off Jonin techniques all afternoon, and had once eaten a full Kazekage-grade earth release without a mark, came apart in a fraction of a second from the sternum outward. Not cracked, erased. 10,000 tons of sand converted into a horizontal storm that stripped the forest to bedrock for 800 meters. The beast folded around him. 200 feet of tailed beast bent at the middle like a man taking a body shot, and its arms came forward, and its head snapped down, and then the whole structure blew backward off its own legs, and the legs stayed where they were for a moment before falling over. The shock wave hit Konoha's east wall a heartbeat later and knocked 40 feet of it flat. And then it hit the sky. That's the thing people talk about. Not the wall, not the forest. The sky. There'd been heavy cloud all day, big gray stuff, sitting low. The pressure wave from that punch went up as well as out, and it pushed the cloud cover off the land of fire. All of it. A hole opened over Konoha and kept opening. A widening ring of clear blue racing out to the horizon in every direction. And for the first time in a week, the whole country could see the sun at once. People in 4 countries wrote about the day the sky opened. There are paintings. The stadium cracked. Long fracture, north to south, right through the arena floor. Every standing structure within 200 meters of Naruto's flight path came down. A warehouse, a water tower, the East Gate House, a stand of ancient trees that had been there since the founding, and the seal held. That's the thing that made the Sealing Corps lose their minds for a year. Blunt trauma at that scale did what no technique had ever managed. Gaara's containment seal, which had been failing all afternoon, reasserted itself involuntarily because the chakra construct holding Shukaku's form together took a physical shock so far past its tolerances that it snapped back into the vessel out of sheer structural panic. The sand fell out of the sky for 11 seconds, rained down over 4 square miles. Angara of the desert came down out of it, unconscious, both arms broken, blood in his hair. Small, that's the word every witness uses. Small, a 15-year-old boy falling out of a sandstorm and landing in a crater with his gourd in pieces around him. Naruto landed 40 feet from him. He came down on both boots in the middle of a crater he had punched into the earth, a hole 200 meters across with glassed edges, where the friction had cooked the sand into something like green glass. He straightened up out of the landing crouch, rolled his shoulders, cracked his neck to the left, then the right. The aura idled back down to its hum, and when the dust cleared enough to see, Naruto Uzumaki looked up. There were people on the ridge. The Sand Invasion Force, second wave. 400 shinobi who had been advancing on the East District in good order 2 minutes ago, with a schedule and a rally point and a tailed beast running interference. They had crested the rise, and they had stopped, and they had watched all of it from 600 meters. Behind them, more. Sound forces from the north pulled off their objective by the sound. Konoha Chunin coming up from the south, weapons out, no idea what they were walking into. And every one of them, every last one on both sides, stood on the edge of that crater and stared down at a 12-year-old boy standing in a field of glass in the wreckage of a tailed beast. With his jacket smoking and one hand fishing around in his pocket, nobody moved. Somewhere down the line, a sand jonin dropped his kunai. He didn't pick it up. Naruto found the pack. It was crushed. He looked at it, took out the one cigarette that had survived, and put it between his lips, and then he patted 3 pockets before he found the lighter. He got it going on the second try. Then he took a drag, and he looked up at 400 invading shinobi on the ridge above him with an expression of purely mild inconvenience. The face of a man whose bus is late, and he exhaled a long stream of smoke into the newly clear sky. Up on the ridge, somebody whispered, "That's a genin." Naruto Uzumaki looked up at 400 men who had come to burn his village down, took the cigarette out of his mouth and said, "Line up or leave. I'm not walking up that hill." And honestly, that line is half the reason they built the statue. Think about what he actually offered them. He didn't threaten them. He didn't posture. He gave 400 trained killers a choice between 2 things and made it clear which one bored him less, and the part that broke them wasn't the threat. It was the "I'm not walking up that hill," because it meant he didn't consider the hill a factor. He'd already decided that the distance between him and them was a formality, and if they wanted the fight, they'd have to bring it to him, and he'd stand right there in the glass and take delivery. Nobody charged. What happened instead was a sound. I've talked to 6 people who were on that ridge, and every one of them describes it the same way, and none of them have a word for it, so I'll do my best. It was the sound of 400 sets of gear settling. 400 men shifting their weight at the same time. Leather creaking, sandals moving in dirt, a collective, low physical exhale that rolled along that ridgeline from the middle outward. And it wasn't a battle cry, and it wasn't panic. It was the sound of an army arriving at the same private conclusion at the same second without a single word being exchanged. The Sand Jonin at the front had his hand halfway to his weapon pouch. It had been there for 30 seconds, long enough for his shoulder to start aching. He was a 14-year veteran named Sasori No Relation, a real name in the Sand's Eastern Division, and he had personally led the assault plan for the residential district. His hand came away from the pouch. It went to his side. It stayed there. He turned around and said, "We're done." Somebody behind him said, "Sir, the Kazakage's orders. The Kazakage is dead." He said it flat, and he didn't know it for sure, but he'd worked it out from what wasn't in the sky over the stadium anymore, and he was right. And that, he pointed down into the crater without looking at it, is standing in the ruins of our weapon. Sound the recall. Wounded first. The sound captain in the middle of the line didn't sound anything. He'd been doing the numbers in his head for a full minute, 400 against 1, and every version of that math had produced the same answer, which is that 400 is not a number that means anything when one of the sides isn't playing the same game. He'd read the wave report. He'd assumed it was padded, because reports are always padded. He watched a 200-foot-tailed beast come apart on impact. He turned, said nothing to anybody, and started walking west. Not running. Walking, with his hands loose and his spine straight, at a pace a man picks when he wants to be able to tell himself later that he chose it. 11 men fell in behind him within 4 steps, 30 within 20. By the time he reached the tree line, he had 90 men in a column behind him, and not one of them said a word about deserting, because it wasn't desertion if the officer was walking. The mercenaries in the back rank were faster and less proud about it. That's the thing about men who fight for money. They have the clearest heads in any army because they're the only ones who ever bothered to work out what they're actually being paid for. 40 of them had cousins and drinking partners in Gatto's 200. They'd heard the stories in 3 different ports. They had, in some cases, seen the bronze statue with the bronze cigarette. They ran. All of them, straight downhill through the brush, gear coming off as they went, and one of them threw away a perfectly good sword because it was heavy and it was useless, and both of those facts had just been demonstrated to him at scale. And on the western flank there was a Sand Chunin, 19 years old, first campaign, who couldn't move. Couldn't. He stood there while his squad peeled away behind him, and he stared down at a boy his little brother's size, standing in a field of green glass, and he wet himself. And nobody in his unit ever said a word about it, because half of them had done something similar, and they'd all agreed to a policy of silence on the walk home. The Konoha Chunin coming up from the south arrived to find an enemy force of 400 walking away from them with weapons pointed at the ground. That's how the invasion of Konoha ended. No treaty, no last stand, no hero holding a gate. 400 men looked into a hole in the earth and decided, individually and privately and all at once, that this particular afternoon was not worth the pay, and they went home. It is the most undramatic ending to a war in the history of the shinobi world. And I want you to understand that it is also the most frightening, because nobody raised a hand. Not one. Every fight in every history book has a moment where somebody swings. This one didn't have that moment. An army looked at a 12-year-old and unmade itself. Naruto watched them go for about 10 seconds. Then he lost interest because they'd stopped being relevant, and he climbed out of his own crater one-handed and walked back toward the smoke. Now I have to tell you about the walk into Konoha, and I'm gonna slow down for it. The village was still burning in 4 places. 2nd Street had a field station set up under a shop awning, 2 rows of stretchers, a Nara girl running triage off a clipboard, a smell in the air that nobody who smelled it ever forgets. The residential district's north block was down, just down, the way a stack of dishes is down. A water main had opened in the market, and there were 3 inches of it running through the stalls, carrying paper and vegetables and one child's sandal. People saw him, and here's the thing that had never happened before. They didn't get out of the way. A woman with a burn up her forearm grabbed his sleeve. Grabbed it. Nobody in that village had touched Naruto Uzumaki on purpose in 5 years, and this woman got a fistful of crimson jacket and said, "My husband's under the Aburame building. They said they can't lift." Naruto looked at her hand on his sleeve. Then he looked at the Aburame building, which was 11 tons of collapsed wall, and he walked over and lifted it, straight up, one side, and he held it while 6 Chunin pulled 4 men out from under it. And he stood there holding up a section of a building for about 90 seconds with a cigarette in his mouth and an expression of total boredom. And when the last man was clear, he set it down instead of dropping it, which is a detail 3 separate witnesses put in their statements because it surprised them. Then he kept walking. He did that 4 more times on the way to 2nd Street. He didn't offer. People asked, and he did it, and he never once said a word about it. And I've thought a lot about why. I don't think it was kindness. I think a man who has spent his whole life being told he's a wrecking ball finds out one afternoon that a wrecking ball is also a very good crane. And he found the whole thing mildly interesting, and mildly interesting was the most anybody in Konoha had gotten out of him in years. At the 2nd Street station, there was a Chunin named Iwashi doing intake, writing names on tags, and he looked up and saw who was standing there, and he was so far past exhaustion that he forgot to be afraid. Uzumaki, you hurt? No, of course not. Iwashi wrote something. We've got 60 here, 40 at the academy. East wall's gone, hospital's over capacity, so they're using the academy gym. He turned the clipboard over. Oh, and the Hokage's dead. Orochimaru got him on the stadium roof, sealed him up in some barrier and... Anyway, he's dead. Killed the 2 dead Hokage he brought with him first and took the snake's arms off before he went. Old man went out swinging. He said it between 2 other sentences. He said it the way you report facts when you've been reporting facts for 4 hours and your voice has gone flat and administrative. And then he went back to writing names because there were 60 people on stretchers and one of them was crying for water. Naruto didn't say anything. Now, I have to be careful here because this is one of 2 moments in this whole story where you see all the way in, and if I overdo it, I ruin it. He didn't move. That's what happened. Naruto Uzumaki went still, and I mean the kind of still that has weight, the kind that changes the temperature of a space. The Nara girl with the triage clipboard stopped writing. A medic 4 feet away looked up because something in the air had changed and he didn't know what. Because here's what Hiruzen Sarutobi was, and Naruto had never once said it out loud and never would. He was the only Kaji in the world who talked about Naruto like a person. He was the man who sat in a hole under his own monument at 7 in the morning and came up the color of old paper and thought, what did we do instead of what do we do about it? He'd tabled the containment vote. He'd said the Kusanagi bent to Danzo Shimura's face in a room full of men who wanted the boy in a box. And when Naruto was 9 and had put 2 academy bullies in the hospital, the old man had come to his apartment personally and sat on the floor because there was only 1 chair and hadn't lectured him and had asked him what he was reading. Nobody had asked Naruto what he was reading before or since. 4 seconds. 5. The cigarette in his mouth had gone out at some point and he didn't notice. Then he walked 6 steps to a section of smoldering wall, leaned down and lit it off a glowing beam, straightened up, took 1 long drag. Which academy gym? He said. North one. Right, and he went and he spent the next 5 hours lifting things, and he did not ask a single person a single question about the 3rd Hokage, and he never went to look at the body. The Hokage funeral was 3 days later. Rain. The whole village in black with white flowers, the photograph on the stand, Konomaru trying not to cry in the front row and losing. Naruto stood at the back, alone. Didn't smoke? That's the detail Kakashi noticed. And Kakashi noticed everything. 2 hours in the rain with a lit cigarette, never once making it out of his pocket, because some part of that boy had decided a funeral wasn't the place. And nobody had taught him that, and he'd worked it out himself. When it was over, he left before the crowd did, and he didn't put a flower on the stand. But that night, at about 2 in the morning, an Anbu on rooftop patrol reported a single figure sitting on the head of the 3rd Hokage's face on the monument. Right on top of it, boots hanging over the stone forehead, smoking, looking out at the village. The Anbu didn't approach. He filed it under nothing to report and went home and never told anybody but me. The fallout came fast because fallout always does. The council convened within 36 hours in a room that was missing a wall. Homura and Koharu wanted a Hokage inside the week. The Sand Village sent a courier with a letter that was 3 parts apology and 1 part naked terror because their Kazekage was dead in a ditch with his face borrowed. Their invasion had walked home, and their Biju, the thing their entire strategic doctrine had been built around for 15 years, had been retrieved from a crater by a squad that came back wrong. I should tell you about that squad, because it explains the next 5 years of Sandleaf relations better than any treaty. Baki led it. 4 Jonin sent in under a flag to recover Gaara. They found him unconscious in a hole with both arms broken and his gourd in pieces, and they found something else, which was Tamari and Kankuro sitting on the crater rim next to their brother, having gotten there first, refusing to leave. And Baki, who had personally trained Gaara, looked at the crater, 200 meters across, glass at the edges. He looked at the 800-meter strip of forest that had been scoured down to bedrock in one direction. He looked at the eastern wall of Konoha, 40 feet of which was lying flat in a field. He wrote in his report, "I do not believe our village should ever again base a plan on the assumption that force is decisive." The Sand ratified an alliance with Konoha 11 weeks later. Fastest treaty in shinobi history. Nobody in the Sand called it fear publicly. Baki called it fear in his memoir, and he called it the smartest fear the Wind Country ever felt. And Danzo Shimura made his move, because of course he did. Here's the thing about Danzo. He was a genuine strategist, and strategists have one honest quality, which is that they respond to information. Danzo had spent 5 years using the word asset about Naruto Uzumaki and pushing containment papers across tables. And then he read the Orochimaru report. Then he went down to the classified evidence archive with the key only 3 men had, and he stood there looking at the Kusanagi, the sword of heaven. In a case, bent 90 degrees at the tip, Danzo Shimura stood in front of that case for a long time. And then he went back upstairs and did the only completely honest thing of his entire life, which was to stop. He never filed another containment proposal. He didn't send a single root operative at Naruto. Not one, not ever. Instead, he began building around him, recruiting harder, expanding Root's foreign intelligence, positioning himself to be the man holding the leash of an animal he knew perfectly well had no collar and never would. He wanted the Hokage seat. He pushed for it hard in that broken council room, and he almost got it. What stopped him was one sentence from Kakashi Hatake, who was there as clan-adjacent representation with 2 ribs still strapped, and who said, when Danzo's name was proposed, "Would you like to be the Hokage that boy doesn't respect?" Nobody voted. They sent for Jiraiya instead. Jiraiya said no in under a second and offered a name. 3 weeks after the invasion, the world's intelligence services finished their homework, and I want to read you the page. Because there is a page, and it went out to 5 villages, and copies of it are framed in 2 Kage offices to this day. Uzumaki, Naruto. Konagakure, age 12, height 183 centimeters, registered rank, Jinin, confirmed engagements, Land of Waves, missing Ningozu, Meizu, Kia, Momochi Zabuza, 7 swordsmen, Kia, Haku, Yuki bloodline, Kia, Gado mercenary force, approx 200, 184 Kaya, 16 survivors, all deposed. Konoha Chunin exam preliminaries, Kinuta Dosu sound, Kaya. Training ground 44, engagement with S-rank Orochimaru, subject displaced target approx the 1.6 kilometers through old growth forest with a single strike. Target abandoned host body. Konoha invasion, one-tail Jinchuriki in full incomplete transformation, defeated in 1 blow. Biju forced to containment by physical trauma. Physical assessment, no chakra network, no detectable chakra. Ninjutsu, none. Genjutsu susceptibility, none. Confirmed by 4 separate attempts including A-rank compound illusion. Weapon effect, none. Confirmed failures against subject's body include kunai, shuriken, Fuma shuriken mist forged, the executioner's blade Kubikira Bocho, and the Kusanagi no Tsurugi, see attached photograph. Ninjutsu effect, none. Confirmed failures include fire, earth, wind, water, and sound-based techniques up to and including Biju scale wind release. Drilling air bullet, which subject flew directly into and emerged from an unreduced velocity. Known method of injury, none. Known method of restraint, none. Known method of negotiation, none. Identified. Subject does not take bribes, hostages have not been attempted, and the one recorded attempt at psychological leverage, Mizuki, T, deceased in service, produced no effect. Threat assessment. Do not engage under any circumstances. Do not pursue. Do not provoke. If subject is moving, get out of the direction he is moving in. Registered rank, Jinin. They put it twice, at the top and the bottom, both times, and I've always thought that was the most honest piece of intelligence writing ever done, because the analyst who typed it up understood exactly what he was doing. He was making sure the person reading the page had to look at that word after they'd read everything else. Onoki of the Hidden Rock read it at his desk in Iwa with his glasses down his nose. He got to the bottom, saw the word Jinin again, and put the page face down on his desk. Then he sat there with his hands folded on top of it. His aide asked if there'd be a response drafted. "There will not," Onoki said. "And Kitsuchi, I want the Eastern Listening Post pulled back 40 miles. Sir, those posts monitor. I know what they monitor." The old man tapped the face-down page twice. I have fought a Sannin, a Kage, and a tailed beast in my life, boy. I have never in my life read a document that told me not to provoke someone. Move the posts. A Raikage named A read it in Kumo, standing up, because he read everything standing up. He got to defeat it in one blow and he went completely still for 5 seconds. 5 full seconds of the loudest man in the shinobi world not moving. Then he sat down, pulled a blank sheet toward him, picked up a pen, and wrote one word on it. Ally. That's it. One word, underlined twice. And he sealed it in an envelope and sent it to his own intelligence director with a note that said, "This is the objective. Work backwards." Kumo made 3 separate diplomatic approaches to Konoha inside the year. Every one of them was rejected as premature, and every one of them was a man trying to make sure that when the storm eventually picked a direction, it wasn't his. And in a small room in the land of water, with the door shut and a lamp turned low, the intelligence heads of Kirigakure and Kumogakure sat across a table from each other for the first time in 11 years, a meeting that officially never happened, and compared notes. Kiri's man went first. He had the Zabuza file. He had the iron shards from the shallows in a jar, and he put the jar on the table, and the Kumo man picked it up and turned it in the lamplight. That's the Kubikiribocho. That's what's left of it. The Kumo man set the jar down carefully. What's your assessment? My assessment is that the age of the Kaji is over and nobody has announced it. Kiri's man refilled both cups. You've read the same page I have. There's no counter on it. Not a strategy, not a weapon, not a bloodline. Every entry in that book has a counter. Every one. That's what the book is. He drank. This one doesn't have a counter. It has directions for getting out of the way. Long pause. So what do? We be extremely nice to Konoha, said the Kiri man, and we pray that village keeps him happy. Which, and I love this, is almost word for word what Jiraiya said to Hiruzen on a rooftop 6 months earlier. 2 enemy nations and 1 Sannin arriving at the same conclusion from opposite directions. What? And the conclusion was be nice to him. Jiraiya brought Tsunade back 19 days after the funeral. I'll skip the search. What matters is the return. Tsunade Senju coming through the main gate of Konoha for the first time in over a decade, with Shizune and a pig in a hangover, walking through a village that was half scaffolding, seeing the 4th face on the monument and the empty rock beside it, and being handed a stack of paper by 2 elders before she'd found a room. She'd read the reports on the road. All of them. Jiraiya had handed her a folder outside Tanzaku Gai, and she'd read it in a tea house and gotten to page 4 and said, "This is a joke you're doing." It's not. Jiraiya, he put a biju down, with a punch. He did, with a punch. 1, Jiraiya said. There's a hole in the clouds over the land of fire in 3 of the paintings. People are painting it. She went to the classified archive her second day in the village, stood in front of the case with the bent kusanagi in it, arms folded, for 4 full minutes, and then she said one thing to the archivist, who wrote it down, because everything the Hokage designate says in a classified space gets written down. Bring him to my office. And here's the thing. Tsunade Senju had spent 40 years in rooms with dangerous men. She'd been in a war with Hanzo the Salamander. She'd operated on Kage. She'd sat across a table from Orochimaru and told him no. She had a complete internal catalog of what dangerous looks like when it walks through a door, and she had prepared herself accordingly. What walked through her door was a 12-year-old who filled the frame of it, ducked slightly out of habit, walked past her desk without acknowledging her, went to the window, and looked out at the village with his back to the next Hokage of Konoha. Then he lit a cigarette. Shizune said, "You can't, that's the Hokage's office." Shizune. Tsunade didn't look away from him. Leave. Shizune left. Now, Tsunade did not test him with a technique. She was too smart for that, and she was frankly too proud to lose in her own office. What she tested him with was straight talk, because that's the only tool she'd ever fully trusted. "You know who I am. Bingo book," Naruto said. "Slug summons. Medical ninjutsu. Invented most of it. Fought Hanzo. Lost. Bounty's the highest of the 3 of you, and nobody's ever collected. That's the resume." She leaned back. "Here's my question, and I want the real answer. What do you want out of this village?" He didn't answer for a while. Smoke going up out the open window into a village full of scaffolding. "Nothing," he said. "That's a lie." It's not. He turned around then and looked at her, and there wasn't any heat in it at all. I asked this village for stuff. When I was little, I asked for a lot of stuff. Then I stopped. He tapped Ash out the window. I don't want anything from it. Then why are you still here? And this is the part where Tsunade Senju told me years later that she made her whole decision because the old man's in the ground, Naruto said, and two people at a noodle stand aren't going to hold a gate. Tsunade sat with that. That's it? That's your reason? A dead man in a ramen stand? And a chunin with a scar? He shrugged. It was the least dramatic shrug in the history of the shinobi world. That's 3. Kakashi's 4. Girl on my team's maybe 5. She's annoying, but she doesn't run. He pulled the cigarette out of his mouth and looked at it. You want to know what I want? It's nothing. You want to know what I'll break something for? It's a short list, and it's not the village. The village is what protects the list. Yeah. He put the cigarette back. That's why I'm still here. And Tsunade Senju, who had come back to this village to be its Hokage, and had spent the entire road trip trying to figure out whether the boy in the folder was a soldier or a bomb, understood in 1 second that he was neither. He was a man with 5 names in his head, and the whole village was the wall around those 5 names, and he would keep that wall standing until the day the names ran out, and no order, no medal, no title, and no threat in the world would move him 1 inch further than that, which is, if you think about it, more reliable than loyalty. Loyalty can be argued with. All right, she said. One thing, from me as the Hokage, and I'm only going to say it once. Go. If I ever ask you to do something and you say no, that's your right, and I won't push. She held his eyes. But if I ever ask you not to do something, you will do me the courtesy of hearing my reason first, before you move. That's all I want. Naruto thought about it. Fine. That's it? Fine? You asked instead of ordering. He was already turning to leave. Nobody does that. He walked out. And Tsunade sat in her new office for about 10 minutes and then poured herself a drink at 11 in the morning and said out loud to nobody, Sensei, what did you leave me? The inauguration was on a Thursday, on the roof of the Hokage residence, with the whole village in the plaza below. Naruto watched it from 3 streets away, on a water tower, feet hanging over the edge. Not eating, not smoking, just watching a crowd do the thing crowds do at ceremonies, clapping in waves, holding kids up, the noise going up all at once when the hat went on. Jiraiya found him there, came up the ladder, which he didn't have to do and did anyway, and sat down next to him with a grunt and let his own legs hang. They didn't say anything for about a minute. She's good at it, Jiraiya said finally. She'll pretend she hates it. She's good at it. Yeah. He'd have liked her getting it. And that's where Naruto Uzumaki stopped looking at the crowd. Jiraiya didn't push. That's the whole reason it worked. He didn't say I know he mattered to you, and he didn't say you can talk about it, and he didn't put a hand anywhere. He'd known this kid 9 weeks, and he'd already worked out the one rule, which is that Naruto Uzumaki would give you the truth for free if you never once asked for it. So Jiraiya looked at the plaza and said, he kept a folder on you, not the classified one, a different one, in his desk, bottom drawer, under the tobacco. Nothing from the kid. Wasn't reports, Jiraiya said. It was your academy work, all of it. Every assignment you ever turned in with that terrible handwriting. He had Iruka send him copies for 5 years. He scratched the back of his neck. Tsunade found it Tuesday. Asked me what to do with it. Naruto's jaw moved. Once. What'd you tell her? Told her to leave it in the drawer. The crowd noise went up again down in the plaza. Somebody had said something good. Good, Naruto said. That's it. That's the whole conversation. It didn't resolve one single thing, because that isn't how any of this works. And if I'd written you a scene where Naruto broke down on a water tower, I'd have been lying to you, and you'd have known it. What happened instead is that a Sanin sat next to a boy for 20 minutes on a Thursday and mentioned a drawer. And the boy said good, and both of them understood that something had been handled. Then Jiraiya said, I've got about 400 pages of seal theory you're going to hate. Yeah, all right. And they climbed down. The world spent the next 6 months adjusting, and the adjustments were strange. 4 countries pulled intelligence assets off the Land of Fire border. because proximity to Konoha had become a threat assessment category on its own. That's a real line in a real Iwa document. Distance from Konohagakure as a scored risk factor, weighted with a formula. Grass and rain both quietly ended border harassment programs they'd run for 30 years. A waterfall raiding outfit that had hit fire country caravans twice a year since before Naruto was born just stopped. And when the waterfall village was asked about it diplomatically, the response was 4 words: "We have no comment." And the civilian world started to hear the name, which is the part nobody planned for and nobody could stop. It didn't come through shinobi channels. It came off boats. It came through the merchant routes out of Wave, through the fishing fleets, through the 16 men who jumped off a bridge and lived and then spent the rest of their lives telling that story in ports for free drinks. It came through a bronze statue of a big man with his shoulder down that fishermen touched for luck, and through the fact that if you ask those fishermen who he was, they'd tell you, and everything they told you was true, and none of it needed help. There's a children's game they played in the land of waves that spring. 2 kids, 1 line drawn in the dirt. One kid stands on the line and the other kid tries to move him. If you can't move him, he wins. They called it Juggernaut. Nobody taught them the word. The word arrived out of the ocean and it stuck because it fit. And by the end of that year, there wasn't a port town from the land of water to the southern coast where you could say it and not have people know exactly who you meant. 6 months after the invasion, 2 men crossed the border into the land of fire, wearing black cloaks with red clouds on them. The border checkpoint at Tanzaku registered them at 11:40 in the morning. The duty officer was a censor type, 7 years in the post, and he read them and sat down on the floor of his own guard station. And when his partner asked what it was, he said, 2. Both S, one of them's Uchiha, and then he sent the fastest bird he had ever sent in his life. Itachi Uchiha's stated mission was assessment. That was true, as far as it went, and Itachi never lied when a partial truth would do. Pain wanted a read on the Ninetales host. Standard forward reconnaissance ahead of a collection operation scheduled for 3 years out. Here's what the real mission was. Itachi Uchiha had murdered his entire family to stop one thing. Not to protect the village. He'd have told you that himself, on a bad night, if you got him drunk, which nobody ever did. He did it to stop a specific outcome, a coup that would have cracked the leaf open and let the other 4 villages in through the gap. And he had priced that outcome against his mother and father and everyone he'd ever eaten dinner with. And he had paid. And then he read a report about a bridge. And then a report about a forest with a mile-long corridor in it. And then a report that said a tailed beast had been put down in one blow by a 12-year-old with no chakra, and that the sky over the land of fire had opened. Itachi Uchiha needed to know if the thing he sold his clan to prevent had already been replaced by something worse. He needed to see it with his own eyes, because he had read every scrap of paper in the world on the subject, and he was the best intelligence mind in the bingo books, and he knew exactly what reports can't give you. So he walked into Konoha in the open, in the cloak. In daylight, through the Eastern District, past the scaffolding, because sneaking up on this target would have been an insult to the effort. Kisame Hoshigaki found the entire thing hilarious. Look at this place. He had Samahata on his back in its wrappings, and he was strolling, actually strolling, past a rebuilt storefront with a grand opening banner on it. 6 months ago there were snakes in this street. Now there's a bakery. Yes, that's people for you. Kasame grinned at a woman who dropped a bag of rice and ran. Somebody kicks the anthill and the ants build a bakery. Kasame, I'm just saying I like it here. He stepped over the rice. It's very optimistic. They found Naruto at Ichiraku. Of course they did. Where else would he be? 12:30 in the afternoon, second bowl, boots hooked on the stool rail, jacket collar up. Tochi at the pot talking about the price of pork the way Tochi had been talking about the price of pork for 5 years. And I want to stop here for 1 second because this stand deserves it. Ichiraku never changed. That's the whole point of it. The village turned on him and then feared him and then needed him. And the world wrote pages about him and painted paintings of the day he opened the sky. And through every single bit of it, There was a cloth flap on a side street, and an old man ladling broth who had never once, not for a single second, looked at Naruto Uzumaki like he was something. Ayame still said good evening. Tochi still remembered he liked extra chashu and pretended not to and charged him for a regular. When Naruto came back from Wave with a body count in the hundreds, Tochi said, "You're thinner. They not feeding you out there?" That's it. That's the entire mechanism by which a boy who lost his chakra network in his childhood in the same night still had a human thread in him at 12 years old. Two people in a pot of soup, two men in red cloud cloaks stopped at the end of the alley. Tochi saw them and his ladle slowed. Ayame, in the back, went very quiet. And Naruto Uzumaki, without straightening up, without reaching for anything, turned his head about 15 degrees. He looked at the cloaks. He looked up at Kasame's height, and Kasame Hoshigaki is 6'4" and blue and shaped like a threat. He looked at Itachi's eyes and held that for about a second and a half. Then he looked back down at his bowl and picked up his chopsticks. "You're interrupting my lunch." Kisame laughed, out loud, big, both shoulders, the laugh of a man who has finally been given something worth the trip. "Itachi." He wiped his eye. "Itachi, did you hear that?" Interrupting his lunch. He hefted Samahata off his shoulder. "Oh, I like him. Can I have him? I want him." Itachi said nothing at all. I want you to understand what was happening behind that face, because Itachi Uchiha did not have expressions, and so everything with him happened in the small numbers. He had come here to gather information. He was gathering it. In 4 seconds he had learned. The subject registered them instantly. The subject correctly identified Kasame as the larger physical threat and looked at him first. The subject then looked at Itachi's eyes, which meant the subject knew what Itachi's eyes were and knew he was supposed to avoid them and chose not to. And then the subject went back to eating, which meant the subject had completed a full threat evaluation of 2 S-rank criminals and concluded it did not require standing up. He is not bluffing, Itachi thought. He has no reason to bluff. A bluff is a tool of the weak, and he has never in his life needed a tool. Then Kakashi Hatake came off a rooftop at speed with his Sharingan uncovered and 3 Anbu behind him, and the afternoon went sideways. Kasame moved first, and Kasame was fast. Faster than anybody gives him credit for, because everybody looks at the size and misses the speed. Samahata came off his shoulder in a swing that started before Kakashi's feet touched the ground, and Kakashi got a kunai up and a lightning blade half formed, and it did not matter. The wrapped sword took him across the guard and drove him into the wall of the building opposite, hard enough to put him through the plaster and out the other side of the wall, and Samahata drank about 1/5 of his chakra on contact. Kakashi went down, not dead, conscious actually, he'd tell you that himself, aggrieved, but down on his side in a stranger's kitchen, with a broken forearm and no wind in him, and one working eye pointed out through the hole he just made in the wall. Down counts. And Itachi Uchiha, in the 2 seconds Kasame bought him, made his move, and his move was the right one, and I want to be fair to him about that. He didn't attack the body, he'd read the page. Every entry in the weapon effect column said none. He went for the mind. "Look at me," Itachi said. Naruto looked at him. Tsukuyomi, the strongest genjutsu in the shinobi world. A technique that takes hold of a target's consciousness and takes ownership of their sense of time. And inside it, Itachi Uchiha is a god with a calendar. 72 hours of experience delivered in 1 second. And there is no defense, because there is nothing to defend. It isn't an attack on the body, it's an edit to the mind. He had used it 11 times in his life. It had worked 11 times. Now here is what Itachi experienced, and I got this from the only person he ever told, and I've thought about it more than almost anything else in this story. He felt the technique launch. He felt his own chakra go out of his eye and reach, the way it always did, the way it had 11 times. And then, nothing. Not resistance. Not a struggle. Not a mind pushing back, which he'd have known how to handle. There was no confirmation of contact at all. It was like throwing a rope into a room and having the rope simply not arrive anywhere, and standing there holding your end and understanding that the room does not have a floor. Because that's the mechanical truth of it. Genjutsu needs a chakra network to travel in. It goes into a person's system, and it rides the pathways up into the nervous system, and it sits there and feeds. Naruto Uzumaki had no pathways. The Cyttorak fire had burned them out at 7 and paved over them, and what it paved them over with 8 foreign chakra and threw it off as heat, Itachi's Tsukuyomi hit the crimson and became slightly warm air, and Itachi Uchiha's composure cracked by about 3 millimeters. That's all. On his face, 3 millimeters looks like nothing to anyone who doesn't know him and looks like an earthquake to anyone who does. One eyebrow came down half a degree. His breathing changed on the exhale. Naruto put his chopsticks down across the top of the bowl. Then he got off the stool. Tochi. He didn't look back. Get in the back and get down. Tochi got in the back and got down, and he took Ayame with him, and he'd tell you later. And he told a lot of people that in 5 years of serving that boy, it was the first time Naruto Uzumaki had ever told him to do anything. Kasame threw Samehada, full throw, both hands, all his weight, 7 feet of living sword coming off a shoulder that had once cut a man in half through his own summon. And Samehada was awake. The wrappings came off in the air and the scales stood up and the thing shrieked because it had smelled something and it wanted it. That sword had eaten the chakra of every shinobi it had ever touched. It had drunk from Akagi. It ate lightning. It had a mouth and a mind and an appetite, and it had never once in its existence been offered something it couldn't drink. It hit the crimson field about a foot from Naruto's chest, and Samehada started to scream. I've had 4 descriptions of that sound, and none of them are the same, which tells you something. Kasame called it screaming. An Ambu on the roof called it a kettle. A woman 2 streets over said it sounded like a pig. What we know for certain is this. Samehada tried to absorb the aura, and the aura went into it, and there was nothing in that sword built to hold what went into it. It swelled. The whole length of it, from tip to grip, ballooned, scales pushing apart, the frame under them straining, red light coming up through the gaps like a lantern with too big a flame in it. It went from gray to pink to a boiling, angry red, and it thrashed in the air. And then Naruto reached up and took it by the handle out of pure reflex, the way you catch something thrown at you. Samehada tried to eat his hand, and then Samehada came apart. Not cut, not broken. It burst from the inside from about 1/3 of the way up, blowing scales in a fan down the alley and taking out 4 shop signs and burying about 60 of them in a brick wall like nails. And what was left in Naruto's hand was a grip and 18 inches of ruined spine, twitching and then not twitching. Kasame Hoshigaki made a sound that was not a word. He'd carried that sword for 11 years. They'd chosen each other. Samehada had refused 4 other swordsmen and picked him, and he had killed for it, and fed it, and slept next to it, and it was the only thing in the world that had ever wanted him around. You, he said. Naruto dropped what was left of it in the street. He didn't say anything. He'd already decided the fight was over, and he was correct, and Kasame Hoshigaki proved it by doing something no bingo book entry has ever recorded him doing, which is standing still with his hands empty. Naruto walked past him. Actually passed, close enough to bump, and Kasame did not move. And Kasame Hoshigaki told me himself, decades later in a bar, that not moving was the only reason he lived, and that he has never once been ashamed of it. Naruto stopped in front of Itachi Uchiha. And this is the part I've been waiting to tell you. He knew who Itachi was. He'd read every bingo book 600 times, and Jiraiya left reports lying around on tables like a man who wanted them read, and Naruto Uzumaki was never, not for 1 second, stupid. He knew about the clan. He knew the district had been empty for 6 years, and he knew the official story, and he knew exactly what the official story smelled like. And he'd known it since he was 9 years old and reading history like a scouting report. He knew there was one name Itachi Uchiha was waiting on. He knew the man in front of him had left one person alive on purpose and had spent 6 years standing in the cold outside his own life, keeping that person's road clear. And Naruto was not moved by it. That's the thing. Not one bit. He looked at the tragedy of Itachi Uchiha, and he registered it the way you register the weather in a country you're not going to. Because Itachi was standing in his village. I know what you did, Naruto said. I know why. I've got the whole thing. He put a cigarette in his mouth and lit it, in the middle of the street, standing 18 inches from the strongest genjutsu user alive. Doesn't buy you a single step past this alley. Itachi Uchiha looked at him. You're not going to kill us, he said. Nope. Why? Naruto exhaled smoke past the side of his head. Cause you didn't come here to fight. You came to look. He tapped Ash. So look, then get out of my village before I change my mind, and take your friend and tell whoever sent you what you saw. He turned around and started back toward the stand. And don't come back on a lunch hour. They crossed the border out of the land of fire in 5 hours and 11 minutes. I want that number on the record, because the same trip had taken them a day and a half, and because it is the only recorded instance of Itachi Uchiha traveling at a speed that could reasonably be described as leaving. Kisame didn't speak for the first 2 hours. Then, somewhere in the hills, he said, I've got nothing on my back. I know. 11 years. Kisame walked. You know what the worst part is? It wasn't that he beat it. It's that he caught it, like a ball, like somebody tossed him a ball. He laughed, and it came out wrong. He caught my sword out of the air and it died in his hand, and he didn't even look at it, Itachi. He didn't look at it. Itachi said nothing because Itachi was doing arithmetic he already knew the answer to. The Akatsuki debrief happened 4 days later in the rain, in the tower, in the rain, with the projection technique running, and all 9 of them present as flickering colored ghosts standing in a circle. Pain listened to the entire report without interrupting. Kisame gave the physical details. Then Itachi gave the assessment, and the assessment took 11 seconds. Tsukuyomi failed to establish, Itachi said. There was no contact. Samahata was destroyed on contact by absorption overload. Hatake Kakashi was neutralized in the engagement, and the subject did not consider his neutralization relevant. At no point did the subject stand up until he had finished deciding whether to. He paused. He is not a Jinchuriki with a weapon. He is a weapon with a Jinchuriki inside it. Deidara said something with the word art in it. He then said something with several other words in it. Kakuzu asked what the bounty was and then went quiet when nobody had a number. And Pain, Nagato, 6 bodies, 1 will, standing in the middle of a plan 20 years in the making, said, the collection schedule stands. We will take the 9 tails last. That is not sufficient, Itachi said. The whole circle went still because nobody corrected Pain. Ever, not once in the history of that organization. Explain. And Itachi Uchiha said the one sentence he had come home to say, and he said it exactly once, and he said it correctly. There is no order in which you can put him that makes him survivable. That sentence reordered everything. Zetsu's half of the plan slid 3 years. The Tailed Beast collection got restructured to prioritize the 7 tails and 2 tails first, in the opposite corners of the world from the Land of Fire. Sasori and Deidara's Suna operation went forward, but with a standing withdrawal order keyed to the words Red Aura. And Nagato personally rewrote the Konoha timeline, because Nagato was a man who had built an entire theology on the idea that pain teaches, and he had just been handed a report about somebody who had received more pain than anyone in the room and had come out of it with no lesson learned at all. He couldn't leave that alone. That's what killed him, eventually. Not a technique. Curiosity. 18 months after the invasion, Sasuke Uchiha had been building something, and I want to give it its due, because everybody skips this part, and this part is the reason the Valley of the End means anything at all. He'd never gotten a shortcut. Remember that. There was no seal on his neck, because a Sanin had gone a mile through the trees before he could deliver it. And so every single thing Sasuke Uchiha had at 14 years old, he had built with his own hands out of his own hours, and he had built a lot. 4 in the morning at Training Ground 3, every day, no exceptions, 360 days a year. The Uchiha compound library gutted and absorbed all of it, 4 generations of technique scrolls, including the ones his father had told him he wasn't ready for. Fire release he'd taken past his own clan's standard and started modifying. The Chidori, which Kakashi had shown him once, and which Sasuke had then taken apart and rebuilt to run off less chakra so he could throw 4 of them instead of 2. Kenjutsu, self-taught, ugly at first, and then not ugly at all. And the Sharingan. Full 3 Tomoe by 13 and a half, awake because a boy with no chakra had made him understand in one afternoon on a bridge that the eyes he'd been born with were not an achievement. By 14, everyone who sparred with Sasuke Uchiha walked away feeling like they'd put their hand on a live wire. Kakashi stopped going full defense against him. Guy wanted him for taijutsu drills. There was serious talk about a Jonin field promotion out of cycle, and Tsunade signed off on the paperwork and then held it because she'd read the psych notes. He was genuinely strong. Top 3 in his generation by any measure anyone could name. He was not strong enough, and he knew it. He knew it with total precision because he'd been measuring himself against one specific yardstick for 2 years, and he had watched that yardstick punch a tailed beast into a crater and then look up at 400 men like they'd parked in his spot. Now I want you to think about what knowing that does to a person who organized his entire self around being the exception. Because Sasuke's whole architecture from age 8 was, I am the one who is different. I am the one who will do the impossible thing. Everyone else is a step, and I am the destination. That's not arrogance, exactly. That's the load-bearing wall of a boy whose family got murdered and who needed a reason to get up. And 2 years of watching Naruto Uzumaki took that wall down beam by beam, because Naruto wasn't better than Sasuke at being Sasuke. Naruto was operating in a completely different category, and no amount of getting up at 4 in the morning was ever going to cross the gap. And Sasuke had done the honest work of proving that to himself and had arrived at the number. He went to Orochimaru, and I want to be clear because this matters more than anything else in this arc. He went. Nobody came for him. There was no seal whispering, no sound 4 at his window, no curse mark burning on his neck at 3 in the morning. Kabuto's approach that year was a single sealed letter left on a windowsill, 1 page, no signature, and all it said was the offer, if you want it, is knowledge. He asks nothing else. Sasuke Uchiha sat at his desk in the empty Uchiha compound at 2 in the morning with that letter in his hands and made a choice with his eyes open. I want to tell you what the emptiness sounded like because I asked him once and he told me. It sounded like nothing. That's the thing. 42 houses, a shrine, a police headquarters, 2 wells, a street with lanterns on it that nobody had lit in 8 years. In summer, there were cicadas. In winter, there was wind through a broken shutter on the 3rd house down that he'd never fixed because fixing it would have meant deciding to live there instead of just sleeping there. And that night, at 2 in the morning, there was a boy in a house at the end of a dead street holding a piece of paper, and there was no one in the world to tell about it. He didn't want revenge anymore. That's the part everybody gets wrong. Somewhere in those 18 months, Itachi had shrunk in Sasuke's head, not forgiven, just outscaled. Because it's hard to build your whole life around killing one man when you've watched somebody delete a tailed beast on a Tuesday afternoon. What he wanted was to reach. He wanted, one time, to stand in front of Naruto Uzumaki and be worth the swing. And the bingo book said exactly 1 man in the world had ever kept a seinen busy for longer than a single punch. And that man was selling knowledge. He left a note on the kitchen table. 4 words. Don't send Sakura. They sent Sakura. Team 7 got the retrieval order at 6 in the morning, and Sakura Haruno was in Tsunade's office at 6:04 because she'd been in the building already, because she'd started her medical apprenticeship 11 months before, and she was in that building at 6 every day of her life. Let me tell you about Sakura at 14 briefly. Because she earned it. She was not a fighter. She was never going to be. She'd sat down with herself after wave, after throwing up in a bush while 2 men's heads met, and worked out, clearly, that she was the weakest person on her team by a distance that could be measured in continents. And then she'd done the only genuinely brave thing available, which was to go find something she could actually be good at. She went to Tsunade and asked to learn medicine. She got 11 months in and she was already the best 14-year-old field medic in the village, and Tsunade had started letting her into surgery, and she had spent 2 years watching Naruto and Sasuke in the space between them, and she had a completely clear picture of what this mission was walking into. "Ma'am," she said, "if Naruto goes, Sasuke doesn't come back." Tsunade didn't look up. "You think Naruto would kill him?" "No." Sakura's hands were flat on the desk. "I think Sasuke's going to make him. And if Naruto doesn't go? Long pause. Then it's me and Kakashi-sensei against the Sound Four and Orochimaru's whole escort, Sakura said, and I'd like to see my mother again. Then you understand the problem. Yes, ma'am. She straightened up. I'm still going. And she went because that is who Sakura Haruno has always been under the fear. Somebody who goes anyway. The Sound Four caught them at the Fire Country border on the second evening. I'll be quick because 4 Sound Chunin meeting. Naruto Uzumaki does not produce a prolonged engagement, and pretending otherwise would be dishonest. They came out of a 4 violet flames formation, a barrier technique, corner anchored, designed to hold a target inside a wall of chakra flame that burns anything that touches it, and they dropped it around Naruto specifically, because Kidomaru had done the reading, and the reading said stop him from moving, which is, and I mean this, the funniest tactical decision in this entire story. Naruto walked out through the barrier wall, straight through. The flame went into the crimson field and came out as heat and a smell like burnt hair, and the formation broke, and the recoil put all 4 of them on their knees. And Jirobo, the big one, the earth type, the one who ate chakra, looked up from his knees at a boy walking out of an S-rank barrier with his hands in his pockets. Kidomaru went up a tree and shot a spiderweb spear from 90 feet. Chakra hardened, armor piercing, the technique he'd killed a Jonin with. It hit Naruto in the shoulder and folded in half. Tayuya got 2 notes into her flute genjutsu. Sakon and Ukon fused and got up to about half speed. Naruto covered the ground between himself and the tree in 1 step, took the trunk in both hands, and pulled the entire tree out of the ground with Kidomaru still in it, and then he swung it. The whole tree, 60 feet of it, the way a man swings a broom. Through the other 3. The tree lost. They lost worse. Sakura Haruno, 70 meters back with Kakashi, watched 4 elite Sound Jonin grade shinobi get removed from the world with a piece of forest and said quietly, "Okay." "Okay?" Kakashi said. "I've decided I'm going to keep being surprised," Sakura said. "It's healthier." The Valley of the End. 2 enormous statues facing each other over a waterfall, a river between them. 100 years of moss. It's the most famous place in the Land of Fire, and it exists because 2 men once disagreed there hard enough to change the landscape. Sasuke was already on Madara's hand, waiting. And the waiting is the point. He'd had 11 hours head start, and he'd used it to get to the one place in the world that meant something, and to stand on the correct statue, because Sasuke Uchiha was 14 and dramatic and dying inside, and he wanted the geometry right. His Sharingan was on, his hands were steady, and there was a specific strange calm on him, the calm of somebody who's decided to do a thing and has made peace with the decision, even knowing the decision is going to break them. Naruto came up onto Hashirama's hand across the water and stopped. Kakashi and Sakura arrived 4 minutes later, and Kakashi put a hand on Sakura's shoulder at the tree line and said, "No, from here." "Sensei." "From here, Sakura." He didn't take his eye off the valley. "This isn't ours." Sasuke spoke first, and he spoke for a while, and I'm going to give it to you almost whole because it's the most honest thing anybody says in the back half of this story. "You know what the worst part is?" He called over the water. "It's not that you're stronger. I could have lived with stronger. Stronger is a number and numbers move." He rolled his shoulder. "It's that you didn't earn it. Nothing from the other statue. I've been up at 4 every morning for 2 years. 2. I've read every scroll in my clan's library, my dead clan's library, in a house with nobody in it, by candle, because the gas got shut off in the empty district and nobody noticed. I broke my hand twice. I put my Sharingan through so much that Kakashi made me get my eyes checked and the medic told me to stop. He laughed once, and it wasn't a good laugh. And you fell down a hole." He let that sit. "That's it. That's the whole thing. You fell down a hole when you were 7 and touched a rock, and now the Kusanagi bends on your stomach, and I've got 4 kinds of lightning and a set of eyes my family died for, and I cannot reach you. I can't get within a mile. I've done the math 100 times, and every time the answer is that there is nothing I can add to myself that closes it." His voice went up and cracked, and he didn't care. "Do you know what that does to somebody? Do you understand what you did to me? I built my whole life on being the one who was different. And then you showed up and you were actually different, and everything I was turned into a hobby. The water went over the falls. So I'm going to Orochimaru, Sasuke said, quieter. And I know what he is. I've read the same books you have. He's going to take pieces of me, and I've decided I don't care, because he's the only person alive who ever made you take more than one swing, and whatever he knows, I want it. He put his hand on the kunai at his hip. And before I go, I'm going to make you use both hands. That's it. That's the whole ambition. Both hands, one time, and then I'll walk out of here and you can tell them whatever you want. Naruto let him finish. That's the thing I want you to see. He didn't roll his eyes. He didn't interrupt, didn't smoke, didn't shift his weight. He stood on a stone hand over a waterfall with his arms at his sides, and he listened to every single word of it with the specific quality of attention that is not patience. It's a man taking in information because he is deciding something. Then he said one line. You keep saying I got given it, Naruto said. I got given a hole in the ground and 4 guys with knives. You want the version where that's lucky? You can have it. I'm not fighting you for it. He shook his head. Once. And you didn't build all that for me. You built it so you'd stop feeling small. And you're still small, 'cause I was never the thing making you small. Sasuke Uchiha's face came apart. Not tears. Worse. It was the face of somebody hearing the sentence they've been carefully building a 2-year-long wall in front of, and hearing it said out loud by the one person whose opinion they'd organized the wall around, in about 9 seconds, without heat, like a man reading a label. Shut up, Sasuke said, and then he threw everything he had, and I want to give him this fight properly, because he deserves it. He opened with the great fireball, but not the academy version. His version, tightened, thrown low and flat off the water, so it came in under Naruto's line with the steam wall in front of it. And behind the steam came 12 shuriken on wire, and behind the shuriken came Sasuke himself with a kunai reversed, 3-layer opening. It would have taken a Jonin's attention. The fireball broke on Naruto's chest and went around him. The shuriken hit and stopped and dropped. Sasuke's kunai went into Naruto's throat, and the blade rolled up like a bad can lid. And Sasuke, still in the follow-through, was already switching hands and already moving, because his Sharingan was reading everything, and his Sharingan was working perfectly, and that was the tragedy of it. He could see the whole fight, in complete detail, in advance, and every single prediction was correct, and every correct prediction told him the same useless thing. He landed 41 hits. Kakashi counted, because Kakashi counted. Lion combo. Full chain. Heel to the ribs, elbow to the temple, up under the chin, the whole thing, with an axe kick to finish that cracked the statue's stone hand and did not move Naruto's head. Chidori. First one straight to the heart. Two-handed, full charge, the sound of 1,000 birds screaming off a waterfall. And Sasuke Uchiha drove a technique that punches through steel plate into a boy's chest, and his hand stopped 2 inches in, and the lightning ran out along the crimson and came back up his own arm and put his shoulder out. He reset the shoulder himself, on the run, and threw another one. Then Phoenix Flower and Dragon Fire along the wire, and a Chidori current he'd invented himself that lit up 8 feet of water and boiled fish. And one technique nobody has a name for because he only ever used it once. He put lightning in the river, all of it, the whole surface of the valley of the end, at a scale that should have taken 3 men. Naruto stood in it. It made his hair move. That's all it did. It made his hair move a little. And here's the arithmetic of it. And it's brutal, and I'm not going to soften it. Sasuke Uchiha threw the best 2 years of anybody's life at that boy, and the wall was still there afterward, and the wall was not even annoyed. Naruto didn't hit him once, not one time, the entire fight. He turned his head to follow him occasionally. Twice he raised a forearm, not for defense, for shade, because a fireball was in his eyes. Sasuke went to his knees on the water 4 feet from him. Chakra empty. Right shoulder wrong. Blood in his mouth from something he'd done to himself. Both eyes still on. Get up, he said to himself, and got up. He got up. He got up and he took one more step and he swung a fist with nothing in it at all, and Naruto caught his wrist. Then Naruto took him by the collar and lifted him off the water one-handed, so their eyes were level. You wanted to know where the ceiling was, Naruto said. That's it. and he threw him. Now, this is the part that tells you everything about who Naruto Uzumaki actually was, and I need you to catch it because it goes by fast. He threw Sasuke at the waterfall. Water. Not at the statue, not at the cliff face, not at the rocks on the eastern bank 40 feet away that would have ended the conversation permanently. He threw a 14-year-old at the one surface in that entire valley that gives, and he threw him at maybe a 20th of what he had, which is still hard enough to break a normal person. And Sasuke Uchiha was not normal, and that gap is exactly the size of the message. Sasuke went into the falls, through the falls, off the rock behind them, and down into the churn at the bottom. He came up 11 seconds later on the far bank, on his hands and knees in 6 inches of water, coughing, soaked, with 3 ribs cracked and a body that was going to ache for 3 weeks. Alive. And knowing. That's the word. Not broken. Knowing. And there is a thing a person's face does when they finally arrive at a truth they've been walking toward for 2 years. It isn't despair, and it isn't peace. It's a kind of terrible relief. The look of somebody who has put down a weight they've been carrying so long they'd stopped noticing it was optional. He knelt in the water for a while with his hair in his face. He wasn't going to Orochimaru. He knew that too. It had come off him in the air somewhere between the statue and the falls. The whole plan, the whole 2-year architecture, the letter on the windowsill, all of it, gone. Because the thing he'd been going to buy was the ability to reach a ceiling that he had now personally touched with his forehead and understood was not a ceiling at all. It was a sky. You can't buy your way to a sky. You can only find out what you actually are underneath it. Naruto stood on the water and watched him get up. He didn't help, didn't offer a hand, didn't move a step closer, didn't say one single word. He put his hands in his jacket pockets and he waited for a long time. And every second of that waiting was Naruto Uzumaki refusing to do the one thing that would have taken this away from Sasuke, which was make it a rescue. Sasuke got himself up on his own feet. Then he walked. He walked past Naruto, up the bank, dripping, holding his ribs, and he did not look at him and he did not speak. And Naruto turned around and followed him. 2 steps back. They walked the whole way to Konoha like that. 2 days. Sasuke in front, Naruto 2 steps behind, and Kakashi and Sakura 50 meters back of both of them not saying a word either. And in 2 days and 40-some miles, those 2 boys did not exchange one syllable. I want you to understand what that silence was, because it is the loudest thing in the entire history of those 2. It was Naruto not gloating. It was Sasuke not apologizing. It was Naruto walking behind instead of in front, which is the closest that boy ever came in his life to saying you're not a prisoner. It was Sasuke not asking him to slow down. It was 2 people who had been standing on opposite sides of a wall for 2 years, discovering that the wall was gone, and neither of them had anything ready to say about it, and deciding, without discussing it, that nothing was fine. At the gate, Sasuke stopped, turned around, looked at him for the first time in 2 days. "I'm not going," he said. "I know. I'm not doing this for you." "Good," said Naruto, and walked past him into the village. That was their whole conversation. Sasuke Uchiha put himself on probation voluntarily the next morning, wrote out a full report of the Orochimaru contact for T&I, including the letter, and asked Tsunade for a Genin team to teach. She gave him one. 2 years later, it was the best drilled squad in the village. 3 years passed. I'll do them fast, because a legend needs a jump, and this is where the jump goes. Jiraiya taught him for 3 years and never once taught him to fight, which is the funniest and wisest decision that man ever made. What he taught him instead was everything else. Seals, real ones, Uzumaki grade, and it turned out that a boy who could not mold chakra could still design a seal on paper better than most jonin, because seals are a language, and Naruto had been reading obsessively since he was 9. History, geography, how supply lines work and where a battalion eats, how to read a written report and find a lie in it, how to talk to a merchant, a mayor, a soldier, and a man who wants something from you. They went everywhere. 3 years, 11 countries. And here's what actually happened out there, which nobody planned. The world met him. Not the page, him. A big scowling teenager who chain smoked and lifted a collapsed roof off a family in grass because a woman asked and never mentioned it afterward. Who broke up a slaver operation on the water country coast in about 4 minutes because he happened to be walking past the dock. Who sat in a bar in the land of rivers and let an old veteran tell him about a war for 2 hours and bought the drinks. The stories got better because the stories got true. By 15, there were villages in 3 countries with his name written on the inside of the town gate for luck. Konoha changed too, rebuilt bigger. The east wall came back in stone twice as thick, and everybody called it the wall that fell down, affectionately. Tsunade turned out to be an outstanding Hokage. The Sand Alliance held, and Gaara of the desert became Kazekage at 17, and the first thing he did in office was send Konoha a formal letter of thanks for the incident of 6 years prior, which is an extremely Gaara way to say thank you for hitting me hard enough to shut the voice up. And the bingo books gave Naruto Uzumaki 2 pages. The threat line had changed. It didn't say unknown anymore because they knew now. 3 villages, independently, in 3 languages, arrived at the same word, and it went into all 3 books inside the same year. Untouchable. Then Nagato moved. Here's how it arrives. And I want to write it like weather, because that's what it was. The kind of weather that doesn't announce itself, it just shows up, and by the time you look at the sky, the damage is already happening. 2 in the afternoon, clear day. The northern gate guard saw a man walking up the road alone in a black cloak with red clouds on it, and one of them got a warning off, and the other one didn't get anything off at all. And then there were 6 of them inside the village at once, in 6 different places, and Konoha was in a war it hadn't been told about. Understand what the 6 paths of pain actually is, because it's the most horrible weapon anybody ever built. 6 corpses, 6 people who used to have names and families, with black rods driven through their skulls and spines, sharing one man's eyes and one man's will and one man's grief. Grief that had been sitting in a cave in the rain for 20 years, turning slowly into an idea. They do not communicate. They don't need to. They are one mind and 6 bodies, and each body has a job, and every job is a piece of a machine that has never once failed. The animal path went first. Summoning. No seals needed. The Rinnegan does it by looking, and a centipede the size of a train came up through the market street and took out 11 stalls in 4 seconds. Then a dog. Then the dog split into 2 dogs when Kotetsu hit it, and then 4, and then 8. And Kotetsu Hagane went down under 6 of them, and Izumo went down pulling him out. The Asura path came into the northern residential district and opened up. That thing wasn't a body anymore. It was a weapons platform. Arms that split into cannon barrels, missile racks in its shoulders, a blade that came out of its wrist, and a head that folded open and fired. It flattened 2 apartment blocks in 90 seconds and killed 9 Chunin and a Genin team sensei. The human path went into the TNI building and started reading minds by pulling them out through people's foreheads. 4 names in 11 minutes. It was hunting for one specific piece of information, and it got it out of the 4th man, and the information was where the Nine Tails host lived. The Preta path met a Jonin squad on 4th Street and drank every technique they had. Fire, water, a Yamanaka mind attack, all of it, absorbed to nothing. Then it walked through them. The Naraka path stood in the plaza and summoned a head out of the ground that repaired the others as fast as they broke. And the Deva path stood on the water tower over the eastern district and looked at the whole village at once and said, in a voice that carried all the way to the Okage residence, "I am here for the Jinchuriki. Bring him to me and this ends." Kakashi Hatake engaged the Asura path with 2 squads and lost both squads. He put a lightning blade through its chest and it kept firing. He got a wall between himself and a missile, and the wall didn't help. He came out of that fight with a shattered left arm and a hole in his vest and 1 working eye, and he'd bought about 6 minutes, and 6 minutes cost him 11 people. Tsunade got a barrier up over the hospital and held it personally, and that is the only reason there was a hospital afterward. And Naruto Uzumaki was at Ichiraku. He was on the 2nd stool, 2nd bowl, because he'd gotten back from the land of rivers that morning. Tochi was talking about the price of pork, still 3 years on, and Ayame had said good evening, even though it was 2 in the afternoon, and there was a cigarette burning in the ashtray on the counter that Tochi kept there for him and had never once mentioned putting there. The first explosion rattled the bowls. Naruto put the chopsticks down. He looked up past the cloth flap at a column of smoke going up over the North District. 3 seconds. I want to be exact about those 3 seconds because they weren't hesitation. Naruto Uzumaki did not hesitate about anything ever in his entire life. What those 3 seconds were is the gap between a man deciding something and the world catching up to the fact that he's decided. Then he picked up the bowl, drank the rest of the broth in 4 swallows, set it down, and stood up. Tochi. He put money on the counter, the right money, exact. Basement. Both of you. Don't come up till it's quiet. He walked out through the flap. He got about 11 steps up the street at a walk. Then a second building came down somewhere behind the market, and he stopped walking. Because walking is not the appropriate response to your village being on fire. And Naruto Uzumaki moved. The crimson came up as he went, and the street cracked in a line behind him, and every pane of glass on that block let go at once. They found him in the open, in the plaza, all 6 of them, because the Deva Path had seen him coming from the water tower and pulled the whole formation to one place. 6 bodies in a loose ring around one teenager in a crimson jacket. 2,000 people watched this. That's the thing about the plaza. Every rooftop had somebody on it. Every window that still had a window in it had a face behind it. And the entire Konoha shinobi corps that was still standing had converged on the noise and then stopped at the edges because there was nothing for them to do. The animal path went first. It brought up everything at once. The centipede, the multi-headed dog, a great crested bird the size of a house, and a rhinoceros that came out of the ground already running. 4 summons, all of them Kaji grade, all of them converging from 4 directions. The rhino got there first and hit Naruto square in the chest at full charge. 10 tons of armored animal at 40 miles an hour. It stopped. Not slid. Stopped, dead, with its horn folded and its front legs buckling under its own momentum, and Naruto took it by the horn and put it into the dog. The bird came in with its claws out. He caught it by one leg out of the air and swung it into the centipede, and both of them went into the side of a building, and the building lost its front. 11 seconds, 4 summons. The Asura Path opened fire, everything it had. Both shoulder racks, 6 missiles, the chest cannon, the arm blade extending on a chain to whip around behind him. And the missiles hit the crimson field and detonated in a ring, and the plaza filled up with fire and smoke and pieces of paving, and the whole crowd on the rooftops flinched back from the heat, and Naruto walked out of it with his jacket smoking. The arm blade wrapped around his neck from behind, chain-driven and tightened, and the whole chain came apart link by link, the way a certain gauntlet had come apart on a road in Wave 3 years earlier. Naruto reached back, took the loose end, and pulled. The Asura Path came off its feet toward him, and he met it in the middle and put his fist through it, and the machinery in that body came out the other side in a spray of parts across 40 feet of plaza. The Preta Path came in for the aura. That's what it does. It absorbs. It puts its hands out and takes chakra in any form, any volume, any technique, and it has never met anything it couldn't drink. It had swallowed a Jonin squad's entire arsenal 8 minutes earlier without breathing hard. It got both hands on Naruto's chest and it started to pull. And the crimson went into it. I've got 4 accounts of this, and they all use the word lit. The Preta Path lit up. Red came up through it. Through the arms first, then the chest, then the throat, the veins under the skin glowing like wire in a fire, and its head snapped back, and its mouth opened, and there was light coming out of the mouth, because it wasn't chakra. That's the whole thing. That absorption technique was built to take in chakra, and it had reached into something that was chakra's older, meaner cousin, and asked for a drink and gotten the whole river. The Preta Path went out backwards, off its feet, off the ground, 20 feet across the plaza, burning from the inside, and it was ash before it landed. Nagato, in a cave 100 miles away, felt 3 of his paths die inside 20 seconds, and had to grip the arms of his throne. The human path came at him from the flank with its hand out for his forehead, going for the mind, Going for the one attack that had never failed and would never fail, Naruto broke its arm at the elbow with the back of his hand and then broke everything else. The Naraka path tried to summon the repair head, and Naruto stepped on the summoning circle before it finished, which is not a counter anybody has ever written down, and then stepped on the Naraka path. 5 down, 91 seconds. And the Deva path came off the water tower and landed in the middle of the wreckage of its own body count, and it looked at him with those ringed eyes, and it said, "You cannot understand what I am doing here. You have never known real pain." Naruto looked at it. "You talk about peace while you're burning buildings," he said. "Pick a lane." And the Deva path put out its hand. "Shinra Tensei, I need to build this properly because it is the biggest technique in this story before the last one, and because what happens to it is the whole point of Naruto Uzumaki. The almighty push is gravity. That's it. That's the whole trick. And that's why it's unanswerable. It isn't fire that you can smother or lightning you can ground. It's a repulsive force applied from the Rinnegan outward in all directions at once. And it does not care what you are made of, because everything has mass, and everything with mass answers to it. In another version of this story, that technique came down on this village and turned it into a bowl. A crater a mile wide where Konoha used to be. No survivors in the middle. It has flattened mountainsides. It has caught a Kage-grade summon out of the air and put it into the ground. The Deva path put out its hand and used it at full power from 30 feet, aimed at one boy, and the plaza bent. Everything went. Every stone in the paving lifted and went backwards. The market front on the eastern side of the plaza came off its foundation and folded away like a page turning. 2 water towers, a clock tower, 400 feet of wall, gone, pushed, converted into a ring of debris, traveling outward at a speed that killed 3 people on the rooftops who didn't get down. The air went out of the middle of the plaza entirely, and the sound of it arrived somewhere over the Hokage monument and knocked a tile off the 3rd stone forehead. And in the middle of the biggest push that man ever threw in his life, Naruto Uzumaki leaned into it. That's what he did. That's all he did. He put his shoulder down and his boot forward, and he leaned. Because that is the rule. That is the one law in him, the thing that settled into him in a black cavern when he was 7 years old with a broken wrist. And it doesn't have exceptions, and it has never had exceptions, and it never will. Once Naruto Uzumaki commits to a direction, no force in this world or any other has jurisdiction over his momentum. Not steel, not fire, not a Biju's wind, and not gravity, because gravity is just another thing that is in the way, and it's all the same amount of in the way. 2 absolutes met in a plaza in Konoha. One of them was a technique. The other one was older than the idea of techniques, and it did not know the word stop, because nobody had ever taught it the word. Because the entity that made it had never needed one. Naruto took 1 step forward into the almighty push. The stone under his boot went to powder. The step covered 8 inches. He took another one. And here's what everybody on those rooftops saw, and what 4 of them painted later, and what Kakashi Hatake described in the debrief in 1 sentence he never improved on. He walked up it. The push was still going. The Deva path had its hand out, and the technique was at full output, and the debris was still going outward at the edges. And there was a boy in a crimson jacket walking up the middle of it, step by step, 8 inches, 10 inches, a foot, with the light around him getting brighter and the ground unmaking itself under his boots and his coat pinned flat back off his shoulders. 30 feet took him 9 seconds. And the Deva path's face, look, Nagato's paths didn't have faces. That's the point of them. They were dead men with rods in their heads, and their expressions had been over for years. That one had a face for about 1.5 seconds. Because inside a cave 100 miles away, there was a man on a machine who had built his entire 20-year theology on one single load-bearing certainty. I have the ultimate force. I am the one who can move anything, and therefore I am the one who gets to decide what happens. Everything else he believed was downstream of that. The peace, the pain, the plan, all of it stood on top of nothing can stand in front of Shinra Tensei, and it was standing in front of it. Stop, said the Deva path. No, said Naruto, and he hit it. 1 punch, right hand, And the Deva Path of Pain, 6-foot orange-haired corpse with a god's eyes in its skull, stopped being an object in the plaza and became a red line going north, out over the wall, out over the forest. And the trees came apart in a sequence going away into the distance for about 4 seconds, the way they had once come apart in the forest of death. And then there was a crash from a very long way off, silence over Konoha. 2,000 people on rooftops. Nobody made a sound. Somewhere a piece of masonry let go and fell and everybody heard it. Naruto stood in the wreck of the plaza and patted his jacket for a cigarette, and the pack was crushed. Again, and he looked at it and said out loud to nobody, "Every damn time." He traced the rods back. That's the part the intelligence services couldn't get over afterward. He didn't need Hyuga eyes or a sensor squad. He picked up one of the black rods out of the Asura Path's wreckage, turned it in his fingers, and then just started walking north. And when Kakashi caught up to him, one arm strapped, refusing to sit down, and asked how, Naruto said, "It's pulling, feels like a fishing line." And Kakashi wrote that down, and 11 sealing experts have argued about it ever since, 9 miles. He walked it in 20 minutes. There was a paper tree on a hillside, and inside the paper tree there was a room, and inside the room there was a man on a machine. Now, this next part isn't a fight, and I'd be cheating you if I dressed it up as one. Nagato of the Uzumaki was 35 years old and looked 80. His legs were gone, not missing, just finished, thin as a bird's, hanging off a chair that had grown into him. Black rods came out of his back into a device with wings. His hair was white and long, and his ribs showed through his skin, and he had not stood up in 15 years. He'd been dying for a decade and getting the job done slowly with will. He'd been sustaining 6 corpses across 9 miles on nothing but grief. Conan stood at his shoulder with paper already coming off her arms. Naruto walked into that room and stopped 10 feet away, and the two of them looked at each other. And I want you to appreciate what was actually in that room, because it's the whole thing. 2 orphans, 2 Uzumaki, though only one of them knew it. 2 boys who got handed exactly the same starting hand, no parents, no protection, a world that saw them as a problem, and a war that had already decided what they were worth before they could walk. Both of them found a power nobody else had. Both of them got strong enough that nothing could touch them anymore. And one of them used it to build a cave and a plan and a machine that would hurt the whole world until the world admitted it was sorry. And the other one got a bowl of ramen and a chunin who asked if he was okay and never asked anybody for anything again. Same start, different ending, sitting 10 feet apart. "So you're the little man behind it," Naruto said. "I am pain." Nagato's voice came out like paper. "And I am going to be honest with you, because there is no longer any point in anything else. I cannot beat you. I understood that at 9 miles when the third body went. I have spent 20 years and I have nothing that reaches you." His hands moved on the arms of the chair. "So tell me instead. I want to know. You were hated, beaten, hunted from what I have read by grown men when you were a child. You lost more than I did, and you lost it earlier." His eyes came up. "How did you not arrive here? At this? What did you understand that I did not?" Now this is the moment where a different man gives a speech about peace. Naruto Uzumaki did not do that, and thank God, because it would have been a lie, and everybody in this story would have known it. He did not have a philosophy. He had never in his life had one. He didn't think the world was fixable, and he didn't think it was worth fixing. And he had never once wondered about the cycle of hatred, because he had a short list of names and a wall around them, and that was the entire content of his politics. What he did instead was look at a dying man in a chair for about 4 seconds, and then say the truest thing anybody says out loud in this whole story. "You made everybody pay for it," Naruto said, "because you couldn't lift the one guy you wanted to." Nagato stopped breathing. "Yahiko," Naruto said. "Right? That's the name in the reports. Your friend. He went down in front of you and you couldn't do anything, so you got strong enough that nothing could ever go down in front of you again. And then you found out it doesn't work like that." He pulled the crushed pack out of his jacket and looked at it and put it back. "So you built a religion out of it, because I couldn't save him is a sentence a guy can't live in, and the world has to learn is a sentence you can work in for 20 years. The paper on Conan's arm stopped moving. That's it. That's the whole thing. Naruto's voice didn't rise at all. You're not a god. You're a guy who lost his friend and never put him down. I have talked to Conan about this. Once, she agreed to talk to me for 11 minutes in a tea house in the rain, and she spent 4 of them on this. She said Nagato started to cry. Not dramatically. He didn't have the water in him for that. 2 tracks down a face that hadn't moved in 15 years, and his hands came off the arms of the chair, and he sat there in the dark in a paper tree with a boy standing over him who had just described the inside of his own head to him in 9 seconds flat. And he did not argue because there was nothing in it to argue with. You are right, Nagato said. Which is worse than being defeated? Yeah. Are you going to kill me? Naruto looked at the machine, at the legs, at the rods. Nah, he said. You've been doing that for 10 years. You're nearly done. And he turned around and walked out. That's it. That's what he did. He did not forgive Nagato of the Uzumaki, and he did not lecture him, and he did not offer him a road back, and he did not take his life either. He looked at a man who was 3 months from finishing the job himself, and he correctly identified that there was nothing left in that room worth spinning a punch on, and he left him in his chair with the truth sitting in his lap. Conan followed him out, stopped him at the paper tree's edge with the rain coming down. She had every right to swing. She didn't. She looked at that boy for a long time in the rain, and then she said the one thing she'd earned the right to say. He was somebody's friend too, Conan said, once, before he was that. Naruto stood there in the rain, and this is one of only 2 places in this whole story where you see all the way in, and it lasts about 2 seconds, and then it's gone. He said, I know. Then he took the crushed pack out of his jacket, and there was 1 cigarette left in it that had survived, bent, and he looked at it, and he put it in her hand instead. Didn't explain. Didn't look at her while he did it. Just put it in her hand and closed her fingers on it, and started walking south into the rain toward the land of fire. Conan stood at the edge of a paper tree holding a bent cigarette, and she did not understand it, and she has never claimed to. Nagato died 41 days later. The Akatsuki lost its center that afternoon, and Zetsu had to tell a man in a mask, for the first time in 100 years, that the plan needed rewriting. The 4th Great Ninja War had been coming since Itachi's report, and it arrived 13 months after that. 5 villages, 1 alliance, 80,000 shinobi, 5 Kaj, and 1 tent for the first time in history. On the other side of the field, 100,000 reanimated corpses of everybody's dead, 100 white clones for every man in the alliance, and behind all of it, a man in a mask with a plan to fold the world into a dream and never let anybody wake up. The alliance fought that war for 4 days, and I'll give it to you in 1 paragraph, because this isn't its story. They held. They lost about 11,000 people holding. The reanimated dead were sealed, division by division, at a cost. The 10 Tails came up out of the ground on the 3rd afternoon, and the combined Kaj and 80,000 shinobi fought it to a standstill in front of a mountain. And that standstill was the finest hour in the history of the shinobi world. And Onoki of the Hidden Rock lost the use of his left arm, holding a piece of it off a medical corps of 400. And then, on the 4th morning, Madara Uchiha came back. Let me tell you what that meant. They pulled him out of the ground with the reanimation technique, and then he cut himself loose from it, which had never been done. And Madara Uchiha in the flesh, on a battlefield, with 100 years of preparation behind him, and his own eyes back in his head, is not a shinobi. He's a change in the physics of the area. He killed the 1st Division in 8 minutes. Not in a bloodbath. He rearranged them. He put a wall of fire release down one flank and moved 4,000 men into a corridor they didn't choose, and then walked down the corridor. He took the 3rd Raikaji's reanimated body apart with his hands. He caught Onoki's dust release, the technique that removes matter from existence, on the back of a Susanoo rib and walked forward through it. He killed 20,000 shinobi in a morning. 20,000. 4 Kage engaged him at once with everything they had, and he beat all 4 of them at the same time and left them alive because he was busy. At 11 in the morning on the 4th day, In a command tent with the wall open to the field, the 5 Kage of the shinobi world arrived at one unanimous, undeniable conclusion, and Tsunade Senju was the one who said it out loud because she was the one who'd been sitting on it for 6 years. We can't win this. Not the way we fight. She put both hands on the table. There's one asset on this board that isn't bound by the way we fight. Nobody argued. That's the thing. Onoki didn't argue. Didn't argue. The Mizukage didn't argue, and Gaara had been waiting for someone to say it since dawn. Call him, said the Raikage. They called Naruto. He'd been in reserve for 4 days because Tsunade had asked him. She remembered the deal. She gave him the reason first, to stay off the field until the reanimated corpses were sealed. Because you can't kill a dead man twice and blast radius, doesn't care whose side you're on. He'd honored it. Sat on a rock behind the medical camp for 4 days, smoking, reading a report on troop distribution, occasionally getting up to carry 6 stretchers at once. The order came at 11:40, stood up, put the report down on the rock, and started walking north. Kakashi Hake caught him at the camp perimeter. One arm still bad from pain, Jonin vest, forehead protector up. I'm coming. No. Naruto, you'd be in the way. Sakura got in front of him 20 steps later in her medic's coat, with blood to the elbows from 4 days of surgery in a tent, and she'd grown into a woman who could put her fist through a wall and who was the second best medic alive at 18 years old, and she looked up at him and said, "Then let me follow at distance, for after." "There's not going to be an after that needs a medic," Naruto said. "Not for me. For him. For Madara. If you leave anything that can be." "Sakura." He stopped, looked down at her. "I'm not going to leave anything." She let him go. Jiraiya was the last one. He'd come out of retirement for this war, and he was 54, and he'd taken a hit at the Two Tails engagement that he hadn't told anybody about. And he was standing at the edge of the camp with his arms crossed like a man who knew what the answer was and wanted to hear it anyway. "You want company?" "No." "Any reason I'd like?" "Nope," Naruto said. "I don't want anybody in the way, and everybody's in the way. That's the reason." Jiraiya laughed. He actually laughed, standing in a war camp with 20,000 people dead over the ridge. "Yeah," he said. "All right, kid, go on." And Naruto Uzumaki went north alone, across 4 miles of open ground, past the burning wrecks of 2 divisions, over a ridge with 1,000 men on it watching him go, and out onto the plain where Madara Uchiha was standing in the middle of the biggest pile of consequence in the history of the world. They met at noon. "I want to give this meeting its weight, because it's the last one." Madara Uchiha, in the flesh, red armor, hair down past his waist, 2 Rinnegan in his head, and a gunbai on his back. A man who had outlived his own era through pure refusal and spent 100 years in a cave underground, building a plan that ended the world by putting it to sleep. He had fought the first Hokage to a draw. He had a tailed beast folded up inside him. He had never in 130 years of life met a problem he stepped around, and a 15-year-old in a crimson jacket walked up out of the smoke with his hands in his pockets. Madara had done his homework. That's what I want you to understand, because it's what makes this good. He wasn't surprised. Zetsu had been feeding him intelligence for 2 years. He knew the bingo book pages by heart. He knew the word Cyttorak. He was one of about 9 people alive who'd ever seen it written down, and he'd found it in the same place Jiraiya had, in a scroll older than the sage, and unlike Jiraiya, he had not dropped the subject. He knew about wave. He knew about the forest. He knew about Shukaku and the sky opening. He knew what had happened to 6 paths in 91 seconds, and to a Kusanagi and a Samahata and an executioner's blade. He had accounted for all of it in his particular way, which is to say he had concluded that it was a problem of scale, and that his scale was different from everyone else's. "So," Madara said, "the stone and the boy." Naruto looked him over, took his time about it. "You're shorter than I thought," he said. Madara smiled, and it was a genuine smile, and that's the frightening thing about him. He was happy. He'd been bored for a century. "Do you know," he said, "how long it has been since anyone came to meet me alone?" "Nope." "Neither do I." He took the gunbag off his back. "I have read everything they have written about you. I want you to know that I understand what you are, and that I'm going to try anyway, because that is the only thing about myself I have ever liked. Yeah, Naruto said. Get on with it. Madara Uchiha got on with it, and for about 90 seconds the world found out what 100 years of preparation actually looks like. He opened with the complete Susanoo, and I need you to understand the scale of that thing, because words fail it. It's a chakra avatar, a body built out of a man's own energy and worn like armor, and Madara's complete version stood 350 feet tall. A four-armed armored giant with a face like a demon mask and two blades in each hand, and it did not look like a technique. It looked like a mountain had put on a helmet and stood up. It had, in another life, cut a mountain range down to a stump. Four Kaj together had been unable to break its ribs. It came down on Naruto with one blade, and that blade was 200 feet of hardened chakra with an edge that had gone through the fourth Raikage's lightning armor. Naruto put a hand up and caught it. One arm, palm up over his head, and the Susanoo's blade stopped so hard that the entire 300-foot avatar rocked forward on its own swing, and the plane under Naruto's boots went down 11 feet in a circle 100 meters across. Then the crimson came up his arm, and the blade came apart into light from the point of contact outward. All 200 feet of it, unmaking backward up the length like a fuse burning the wrong way. Madara's eyes widened by exactly as much as Itachi's had. Then he stopped playing. Limbo, border jail. This is the one nobody in the world had an answer for. Invisible clones, bodies that exist in a dimension next to this one, that cannot be seen, cannot be sensed, cannot be detected by any eye except another Rinnegan, and that reach into this world to hit you from angles that do not exist. Madara put 4 of them out. He had used one of them to hold the 4th Hokage in place with nothing. 4 invisible bodies came in on Naruto from 4 directions at once, and Naruto turned and looked at one of them. Just looked directly at it, turned his head to a spot in empty air where nothing was standing, and looked at it, and Madara Uchiha, from 350 feet up inside an avatar, felt the entire 100-year architecture of his confidence take its first real crack. Because here's the thing about the Crimson Aura, and nobody ever wrote it down properly, and Jiraiya spent 9 years failing to explain it in a book. It isn't a shield. It's a boundary condition. It's a statement about the space Naruto Uzumaki occupies, and that statement is, this is mine and nothing is in the way. Dimensions are not a special case. Being in another dimension does not remove you from being in the way. It is all the same amount of in the way. The Limbo clones hit the aura and burned, in a dimension nobody could see, and Naruto felt 4 somethings come apart against him and dropped his shoulder half an inch and never mentioned it again. Madara stopped smiling. He went for the win. All of it, everything, the whole 100 years, and the technique he reached for was the one at the end of the plan, Infinite Tsukuyomi. He didn't have the moon set up. That was still weeks of work away in the real plan. But he had 2 Rinnegan and a 10 tails worth of chakra in reach, and he could deliver a personal version of it directly, eye to eye, at a range of 200 meters, and that version had never been survived by anything with a mind, because it isn't an attack. It's a transfer. It takes a consciousness out of a body and puts it in a dream tailored by its own wants, forever, and the body stays standing and stops mattering. It had captured the mind of a tailed beast in trials. It had held Obito Uchiha's mind for 20 years by accident. Madara turned both eyes on Naruto Uzumaki and delivered it. And what happened was warm air. That's it. That's what happened. The most ambitious technique ever conceived by a human being. The entire endpoint of the Uchiha plan. 100 years of engineering aimed at swallowing every mind on the planet. Went into a body with no chakra pathways to carry it, and came out the other side as a slight rise in temperature and a red shimmer. Naruto blinked. Once, that's all. That was your big one? He said. And now I want to show you Madara Uchiha's mind working, because this is the most interesting 90 seconds of his life. He recalibrated. Under pressure, in a fight, for the first time in a century, a mind that had not needed to change position since before the villages were founded, ran the whole problem again from the start. The body cannot be cut. The body cannot be burned. The body cannot be crushed. Susanoo's blade failed at the contact point, not the target. Genjutsu has no receptor. Space-time calmly would require contact, and contact is the failure state. Absorption feeds it. Gravity, and here he thought about the report from Konoha, the plaza, the walking. Gravity is documented as ineffective. Therefore, he cannot be destroyed and he cannot be moved. Therefore, he must be removed from the equation rather than beaten. And Madara Uchiha arrived at his answer, which was the correct answer, the only answer, and it was this: put him somewhere else. Not kill him, relocate him. Drop the entire plane out from under him into a Chibaku Tensei core, a gravity sphere, 10,000 tons of the world's crust wrapped around him, and lift it off the ground. And if he cannot be stopped, then let him be unstoppable inside a moon. Let him punch his way out for a year. The plan only needs 3 weeks. It was a 100-year-old genius solving an unsolvable problem in about 11 seconds, and it was good. He raised his hand to do it. Naruto Uzumaki arrived at his own answer faster, and his answer was that Madara Uchiha had raised his hand. "You've been waiting 100 years for this," Naruto said. "What a waste of time." And he moved. There's no good way to write what came next, so I'm going to give you the facts and let them do the work. The same as I did with the beast. He lowered his shoulder and the crimson came up all the way. And I mean all the way. Past the invasion, past the plaza, past the pillar the farmers saw from 90 miles away. The plain around him didn't crack. It left. 11 feet of topsoil and rock in a 200-meter circle got up off the ground and went outward, and the air went with it. And the sound was one continuous flat note that flattened the grass on the ridges 4 miles away in every direction. Then he was gone from that spot, and the space between him and Madara Uchiha stopped being a distance and became a line. He went through the Susanoo, not past it, through it. 350 feet of complete avatar. The technique that 4 Kage could not break. The ultimate defense of the Uchiha clan. The thing Madara Uchiha had worn like a coat for 100 years. Took him in the chest at the sternum and came apart from the point of entry outward in a wave. And the wave was faster than the eye. One instant there was an armored giant standing on a plain. The next instant there was a shape of light with a hole through the middle of it. And then there wasn't a shape at all. Just a rain of dissolving chakra falling across 4 square miles like ash from a fire that had already gone out. And Naruto came out the back of it and hit Madara Uchiha. Right hand. Full commitment. The only setting he had. Understand what 100 years of the strongest man in the world means. At the moment of contact. It means nothing. It means a body, a very good body, the best there had ever been. A body with 2 Rinnegan and a tailed beast folded inside it, and cells in it that had rebuilt themselves from lethal damage a dozen times. That body stopped being an arrangement. The punch did not knock Madara Uchiha away. It converted him. Everything he was, from the sternum forward, became part of the shockwave, and the shockwave went east, and everything in the direction of east stopped existing in its previous configuration. The plane went first. 11 miles of it, scoured to bedrock in a widening cone, and then the bedrock scoured too, down to a trench you could put a river in. 2 hills that had been on the maps for 400 years came off the maps. The dead forest at the eastern edge of the battlefield went up and out and away, and was not found afterward, anywhere, in any quantity worth recording. The 10 Tails, standing 4 miles east where 80,000 shinobi had fought it to a standstill for a day and a night, took the wave across its flank and came off its feet. A creature the size of a mountain range went sideways and down into the trench, and the SEALs Corps, who had been failing to bind it for 11 hours, got their formation up in 90 seconds because for the first time all war, the thing wasn't moving. And then it hit the sky, and this is the part they painted. The pressure went up as well as out, and it did what it had done once before over the land of fire when a boy hit a tailed beast, except this time it went further because there was more of it. The cloud cover over the entire northern half of the continent came off. All of it at once, a whole opening over that battlefield and racing outward in a ring to every horizon at the same time. And inside 11 seconds, 4 countries were standing under clear blue sky at noon. Fishermen in the land of water logged it. Farmers in earth country logged it. There are 11 paintings of the day the sky opened the second time. And in 9 of them, there's a small red figure at the bottom, standing in a trench. And in the other 2, the painter didn't put him in, because the painter said afterward that it felt wrong to make him small. 80,000 shinobi watched it from the ridges and the flanks and the rear. I've got 200 accounts, and I'll give you 5 faces. Onoki of the Hidden Rock, floating 400 feet up with one arm dead in his lap, watched a 100-year-old ghost he had personally feared since he was a child get erased in one motion, and he started laughing. And he laughed until Kurotsuchi had to hold him because he couldn't breathe. And what he said when he got his breath back was, "The whole century. The whole century." And it was a punch. The 4th Raikage, who had written one word on a piece of paper 6 years earlier, stood on a ridge with his fists at his sides and said, "Ally," just the word, out loud to himself, and then he sat down on a rock. Gaara of the desert didn't say anything at all. He'd been on the receiving end. He knew exactly what everybody else was only now finding out, and he closed his eyes and let it happen, and his sister put a hand on his shoulder. Sakura Haruno, 4 miles back at the medical station, felt the ground go and got a tent pole down over 60 patients with 3 other medics to keep the canvas off the wounded, and she never saw the punch at all, and she has said, more than once, that she doesn't regret it, because she was where she was supposed to be. And Kakashi Hatake, who had been thrown into a war memorial by a 12-year-old 6 years earlier, stood on a ridge at the front of the 3rd Division with his one eye and watched Madara Uchiha come off the board, and he had the exact same thought he'd had sitting at the base of that stone with a smashed ribcage. He didn't say it this time. He didn't have to. 80,000 people were thinking it in unison. The war ended at 4 minutes past noon on the 4th day. Not with a treaty, not with a sealing technique or a sacrifice or a hero going into the ground for everybody else. It ended because a 15-year-old walked 4 miles across a plain and applied himself in one direction, and the direction happened to be correct. And then there was the silence. I need to tell you about that silence, see, because it's the thing every witness comes back to, and it's the reason this story is worth telling at all. It wasn't victory. Armies know how to make noise about victory. It wasn't peace either. The smoke was still up in 9 places. There were 11,000 dead in rows behind the medical camps, and the 10 Tails was still being sealed, screaming into a mountain by 400 exhausted men. What it was the silence of a world that had been moving at full speed toward an ending and had just been stopped in the middle of the stride. 80,000 people stood in the wreckage of the future they'd almost become, on 4 ridges in the sun, under a sky that had been opened for them, and there was nothing to say. The Alliance had come out here to die well. They had all made their peace with it privately, the way soldiers do, and now they were alive, and the war was over, and they had done almost none of it. And in the trench in front of them, a boy in a burnt crimson jacket climbed out of a hole, straightened up, rolled his shoulders, cracked his neck to the left and then the right, and started patting his pockets. The pack was gone entirely. He looked around at the 11 miles of bedrock he had just made and found nothing to smoke, and he said something that carried further than it had any right to in that silence, and 11 different memoirs recorded, and it is carved on the base of the monument at that site today because the Alliance voted on it. And this is what they picked. Anybody got a light? And a cigarette? And a chair? 80,000 people laughed. All at once, on 4 ridges, the whole Alliance, an enormous, ugly, cracked open laugh with crying in it, and men who had lost their whole squads that morning stood there in the sun, laughing until they had to put their hands on their knees. And somewhere in the middle of it, the 5th Kazakage of the Sand walked out into the trench alone with a canteen and a rolled cigarette that he'd been carrying for 6 years for exactly this, and handed both to him without a word. And across 4 countries, in 5 Kage offices and 11 intelligence bureaus and 1 room in the land of water, with the door shut, the same question got asked at the same time, quietly, personally, by every serious person in the world. What exactly are the rules now? They never answered it. That's the honest ending. They wrote a treaty instead, the Shinobi Alliance Charter, 5 villages, permanent, the first real one in history. And every single signature on that page was put there by a man who had watched what happened on that plane and understood that the age of settling things by force had ended at 4 minutes past noon on a Thursday. Because force had a name now and it lived in Konoha and it didn't want anything. You cannot build a war on a board that has him on it. So they stopped building wars. Not out of goodness, out of accuracy. Konoha, 6 weeks later, not rebuilt. You don't rebuild in 6 weeks. Scaffolding on the North District and a temporary market in the plaza with the paving still cracked in a ring where a boy walked up a gravity technique. 11,000 names getting cut into new stone next to the old memorial and a queue of people waiting to watch the mason work because that's what people do. Intact in the ways that count. Kakashi Hake got made 6th Hokage and hated every minute of it. On the record, loudly, for 8 years and was extremely good at it. He kept the hat on a hook and the paperwork in a pile and one photograph on his desk of a Genin team where the tall one is smoking. Sakura Haruno ran the hospital at 22. She could put her fist through a wall by then, and she never once needed to. Jiraiya lived to 68 and spent his last 9 years writing something that was not a spy novel and not the other kind either. 900 pages. He never published it. He gave the only copy to Naruto on his 18th birthday, and the title page said The Gambler's Account, The Life of Naruto Uzumaki, by someone who was there for most of it. And Naruto read the whole thing in 2 nights and gave it back and said, "You got the alley wrong. It was behind the butcher's, not the fish place." Jiraiya fixed it. It's in the Konoha archive now, corrected in his handwriting. Sasuke Uchiha never left again. He didn't get redemption, and he wasn't looking for it, and nobody ever gave him a speech about the power of friendship. What he got was direction, his own, earned, which is the only kind that holds. He taught. 22 years of it. 4 generations of Konoha shinobi came out of Sasuke Uchiha's hands, and every one of them was frightening. And the thing every one of them says about him is that on the first day, before anything else, he made them sit down and he told them, "There is somebody in this world you cannot beat. Find out what you actually are underneath that." And then he made them say it back. He relit the lanterns on his street. Took him until he was 26. He did it one at a time. And Hinata Hyuga, 3 years after a mud field in the forest of death, and then 3 more. And the girl who had been told she was gentle since she was 3 years old had spent every single one of those years becoming something specific on purpose. She made Jonin at 17. She ran a 4-man assault cell in the war and brought all 4 of them home from the 2nd Division, which almost nobody did. And the reason she brought them home is that on the 2nd night she walked point through a reanimated Kiri squad by herself because her eyes were the only ones that worked in that fog. And she had decided at 11 years old, in 3 inches of mud, that she was going to be the kind of thing that doesn't need protecting. She got there. She didn't need anybody to notice, and mostly nobody did. And that's fine, because it was never for them. She and Naruto had a thing, and I'm not going to tell you what it was because I don't know, and because neither of them ever said, and because I think the not saying was the shape of it. They trained together twice a week for 11 years. She was one of about 3 people who could sit next to him without talking. Once at a memorial service, he took her wrist and moved her hand off her own eyes when she went to cover them, which is the same gesture Kurenai once made at her, and the opposite intention, and neither of them mentioned it. There are people in that village who say they were married, and there are people who say they weren't, and the records are no help at all. Make of it what you will. She would, and the Nine Tails once. That's all, and it's short, and it's the strangest thing in this whole story. Naruto was 19. He'd never been inside himself. No chakra, no path, no gate to walk to, and the fox had spent 19 years sealed in a room off a hallway that didn't exist anymore. It had spent the first 5 of those years howling, and the next 14 listening. One night, Naruto fell asleep on a roof and heard something. Not a voice in a cage. There wasn't a cage, just something enormous and very close, and it said one thing, and it said it the way you'd say it to someone in a bunk above you at the end of a long deployment. "I have watched you from in here since you were an hour old. the Nine-Tails said. I was going to eat this village, then a hole in the ground put something in you that I do not have a name for, and I have had 19 years to think about it. A long, low breath somewhere under everything. Boy, I have been sealed in 4 people. I clawed at the other 3 every night of their lives. And me? I have not touched the door since you were 7. A pause. Not out of kindness. I do not have that. It is because I have looked at what you are, and I do not want to be on the other side of it. Longer pause. Also, you smoke too much. It gets in here. Naruto laughed. Out loud on a roof at 3 in the morning, and it woke a cat up. He never heard it again for 19 more years. When he was 38, it said one more thing and told him thank you, and that's a different story, and it's not mine to tell. Here's the last thing, not a ceremony. They offered him the hat twice, and he said no twice, and the second time he said, Kakashi's got it. He hates it. That's how you know he'll do it right. It was a Tuesday in autumn, and Naruto Uzumaki was 21 years old, and he was sitting at Ichiraku on the second stool with a bowl in front of him. Tochi was at the pot, older, talking about the price of pork. Ayame had said good evening, and a kid came in, 7, maybe 8. Orphanage clothes, which you can tell by the sleeves. He got up on the far stool at the end, and he counted out coins on the counter, counted them twice. And he was about 11 coins short of a small bowl, and he knew it, and he was sitting there working out how to leave. Tochi opened his mouth, and before he got a word out, Naruto Uzumaki, without turning his head, without looking at the kid, without any change in his face at all, reached over and pushed his own bowl, full, untouched, the extra chashu one, 11 inches down the counter. Then he went back to reading his report. The kid looked at the bowl, looked at the man, looked at the bowl. Is this yours? Was. Why are you giving it to me? And Naruto said, without looking up, in the flattest voice in the shinobi world, 'Cause somebody did it for me. Eat it before it goes soft. That's it. That's the scene. He ordered another one and paid for both and never said another word to the kid. And the kid ate the whole thing. And Tucci turned around to the pot so nobody could see his face. And outside it started to rain. I've told you a lot of things in this story. Bridges and craters and a hole in the sky over 4 countries. A Sanin in a spare body on the floor of a safe house saying he was bored. Kabuto. An army of 400 taking itself apart on a ridge without a hand raised. A 100-year-old man erased in one motion at 4 minutes past noon. None of that is the reason people still tell it. The reason is a bowl of noodles moved 11 inches down a counter by a man who was never taught how to do that and worked it out himself. Now let me take you back where we started. October 10th. An alley behind a butcher shop on the east side, the lanterns going up 2 streets over, sock in the air. 4 grown men, field grade, one of them with a kunai out and not hiding it. And a 7-year-old boy who weighed 42 pounds in a shirt 3 sizes too big, with a cut over his eyebrow from a thrown bottle, awake for 19 hours because he'd learned what happens if you sleep. Hey, demon. And he ran. That's where this road starts. A kid running through the back streets of a village that wanted him gone, who knew every fence gap and every loose board, and which dogs would bark, running uphill into the brush because adults are bad at brush, with 4 men laughing behind him. He ran 200 meters, and then the ground opened, and the dark said one word to him, and he got up off the stone with a broken wrist, and he walked toward it. He never ran again. Not one step, not one time, not from anything for the rest of his life. 4 chunin in a cavern. A Tokubetsu jonin with a bottle. 200 men on a bridge and 400 on a ridge. A sanin, a swordsman, a tailed beast, 6 corpses with a god's eyes in them, and Madara Uchiha with 100 years of preparation in his hands. Every single one of them came at him, and every single one of them found out the same thing in the same order. That he was not going to move, and then that he was going to. They put a statue of him on a bridge in the land of waves, and the fishermen touch its boot for luck. They put his name on the inside of town gates in 3 countries. They put a monument on 11 miles of bedrock with a joke about a chair carved into the base, because 80,000 people voted, and that's what they wanted to remember. 5 villages signed the only real peace in the history of the shinobi world, and every hand that signed it was steady for one reason: And the reason wasn't hope. And the whole thing, all of it, the statues and the treaty and the open sky, comes back to a hole under a monument, and a boy with blood in his eyes who could have lain there in the dark and waited. He got up and he walked toward the hum. That's the image. That's the one that holds all of it. Everything else in this story is just the world finding out what happens next. The boy who ran became the thing nothing else runs from. And when the last page was written on him, in 5 languages and 11 archives and one 900-page book by an old man who was there for most of it, they all came around to the same short sentence, because there was nothing else true left to say. He never stopped.
He started as a lonely kid with nothing and became the reason entire nations chose peace. One law guided him: keep moving forward. Watch the full journey of the strongest genin who ever lived. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more incredible stories.